Could I have approval of the minutes of September the 27th, 2012 Regional Council meeting? Okay. Dale and McFadden. Are there any questions or errors? If not, all of those in favor? Opposed, anyone? Motion's carried. Just before we start with the agenda, I just want to say that I've invited Mr. Alec Rayburn in order to be here this morning. He, as I was told, is one of the last people that actually was in a council meeting held up here before they had closed this room down and the other council chambers was in the other building. And we do have a councillor here that was there, I guess, at that point in time is Councillor Whitehead. Mayor McCallion, I don't know whether you were in the other building or not before, but yes, you were before it became regional. But I thought because this used to be the old council chambers, it would be nice to have Alec here. And in our agenda, after we just approve the agenda, he will be speaking to us a little bit after Kent gets his presentation done. So could I have approval then for the minutes today, meeting of October the 11th. There's two additional items. There's the two communications that came in. The one was from the City of Brampton, and under other business, which is a resolution regarding the arbitration reform from Mayor Morrison that was sent to us as in your correspondence also. So could I have a motion to move the agenda as amended? Any questions then? If not, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Our first item of business then today, and I'll ask our Commissioner of Employment and Business to come forward and make his presentations. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. I'm extremely happy that Regional Council could meet in this room today. You are a direct successor of the first council that met in this room 145 years ago. This is a historic occasion, and I'm very happy that you are here today. I have some memories of this building and this complex myself from a very early age. My earliest memories go back to about the mid-1950s when my father used to, on occasion when child raising duties called, he would bring me with him when he had to close a deal at the registry office here, and we'd come up from Port Credit and do that. And that was a long time ago as far as I recall. And I was looking at the 1967 history of Peel County that was done in the centennial year. And I was looking each section. It's a great book. If you want to have a look at it, I'm sure there are copies available in PAMA. We have, each section was written by different authors. And I was looking at all of the authors, and I noticed that one of the authors was one Hazel McCallion, who wrote on the library system in the county of Peel at the time. And it was quite interesting reflecting on all of those things. Mayor McCallion, you were chair of the planning committee at that time, it said at that time. And anyway, we're very pleased that this meeting marks really the renovation and completion of the whole of what used to be called the county seat, the judicial and administrative location of Peel County, with the renovation of all of the buildings now, and they can now be used for arts, culture, and heritage uses. You will later in the agenda have a presentation on 3 reports on PAMA, which will coming up later. In your packages, I just point to an article that was written in the Daily Commercial News. This is for construction people, and it's a very good article describing some of the features of the PAMA buildings, Peel Art Gallery, Museum, and Archives, and particularly it describes the construction of the tunnel, which is a major feature and will be used for exhibitions as well as allowing barrier-free access, all-weather access among and between the buildings. We were very, very happy with the official opening of the art gallery, which took place on September 30th. Over 1,000 people came to that opening, and it just shows you the draw that this facility will have, and it will increase as the program moves forward and we open the rest of the facility, which will occur, the grand opening on November 24-25 weekend. That's a Saturday and Sunday. But we have now moved the ribbon cutting and the speeches to Friday night, and I don't know if that works for you, Mayor Fennell. Doesn't still, but so mark in your calendars Friday, November 23 at 6 p.m. for the ribbon cutting for the grand opening. Sorry, I just couldn't do it.
They're both leaving on November 23rd, so.
Okay, well, we tried. Anyway, that's when the ribbon cutting and the presentations will take place. There will be tours of the facility at the lunch break, and so you can join those. And now I'll turn it back to the chair to speak more about our special guest, Mr. Alex Rayburn. Yes, one of the, I think the only councillor who actually met at one of the last council meetings in this room before the new council chamber for the county was created, and it's down in the lower front portion of the old county administrative building on down over here where now the art gallery is. So, Mr. Rayburn, Mr. Chair,
Maybe I
would you like to speak
could just introduce Mr. Rayburn. A few years ago, I asked Grant Clarkson, who was also a member of the council whenever they used to meet in here, and maybe most of you know he passed away just in this last couple of years. And so the only living person that I could come across that actually was one of the last meetings in this room was Alec Rayburn, who was a councillor from, it must have been Deputy Reeve of Caledon, I guess, at that point in time, and represented Caledon Township at that time. And so I thought it would be nice if you know, that he would be able to come and say a few things, maybe tell a few stories about his latest sort of venture and coming to here. And I know that they used to go to a special place for dinner and one thing and another, lunch, I guess it was really called, unless they met after dinner, I'm not sure about that. So Alec is going to be celebrating his 100-year birthday in November of this year, and again, I'm just going to turn it over to him, and he's got a microphone on his tie there, so you'll be able to hear what he has to say. So Alec, if you want to tell us some of your experience and stories about the past, we'll give you that opportunity now to do that. You can do that sitting down if you like.
Well, I can stand up a little while, but I was just thinking here, when we, I guess it was the county council we used to meet in one of these areas, and I believe the mayor of Brampton was Nance Horwood, am I right there?
Yeah.
And there was always a question at noon hour, excuse me, at noon hour where we'd get our lunch. Some didn't like to go up to the Chinese restaurant, and some did. But there was a lady on the next street
Just behind us.
running from the main street. And she came over and she said, I have a big dining room and I would serve dinner to any of you counselors that wanted to come over. But it was quite a walk around and up the next street. So we got the idea we'd cut a hole in the board fence over there and we could crawl right through into her, walk through a path up in her garden and in the back door, and she served a very, very good meal, and we got used to that. But Nance Horwood didn't like the idea of stooping over to crawl through a hole in the fence, and in those days, not many women wore slacks. They all had skirts, and it wasn't very ladylike, Nance figured, to go through the hole in the fence. So she hired a carpenter and nailed the hole over so we couldn't go over anymore. But there was things like that went on in those days. I guess you couldn't do them now. I noticed when we drove in today, there was a new board fence up there. Well, then they had I forget what that, it was the museum board I was on, and we were running short of money for the museum, so we all had ideas of how to gather some money for fundraising. My idea was, when I looked up the history books, there used to be a scaffold out in the yard where they hung people. And so I suggested that we get a dummy man, a rubber man, and build a scaffold in the backyard here and charge $10 admission to see a man hung. But Nancy, she wouldn't go for that at all. That was too not ladylike at all. But I don't know how long I can have here, but I'll tell you a story about Hazel and I. You all right, Hazel? Shortly after the Region Appeal was formed, there was a federal conference down in the Maritimes on the island there, out from Nova Scotia. What's the name of that island?
Prince Edward Island or Cape Breton?
No. And the federal government, I guess, had the party, and they served dinner. They're great hosts down there at Charlottetown. That's where it was, Charlottetown, in the hockey rink. And they were there for people there from all over Canada, federal people, Ontario people, and the new regional people like us from, and Nancy, or Hazel and I went, several others, from the new Peel Regional Council. There were, they gave us a lobster dinner, and out in the playing area of the arena, they had a number of rowboats, half full of water and ice, and bottles of beer floating in them, and you could help yourself. And they served a lobster dinner. While we were eating the dinner, Hazel said to me, there's a fish shack down by the water. You can go over there and buy fresh fish. They'll wrap it in dry ice and send it to your post office. And you can pick it up when you get home, and it'll be as fresh as the day it was caught. Is that right, Hazel? So Hazel and I went over, we lined up in a little lineup, and the fish house was pretty primitive. It had, the floor was 6-inch planks with about half-inch gaps between them. And up at the counter buying some fish was people that looked like the financial people for federal government. Hazel said to me, I think that's the Minister of Finance up there buying fish. And we watched him for a while, and he took out his wallet, and he took out a buck full of change, and he was counting it, and some of it fell off onto the floor. And the floor was all wet. They hosed it down, I guess, now and again to stop the smell of fish. But he just looked at his own change, and he took his foot, and he pushed the change down through the cracks in the floor. And Hazel said, my, look at that, Alex, she said. He pushed his change down through the hole in the floor. And in a fairly loud voice, Hazel said, well, if the Minister of Finance of Canada doesn't look after Canada's finances any better than he does his own, God help the rest of us. So it just shows you that way back then, a few words from Hazel confounded the best of them. Thank you.
What about you? Alec. Somebody else that was pretty famous that you told me a few stories about the other night was Cyril Clark. Do you want to tell one or two of them?
You want me to say that?
Sure. Go ahead. Just sit down. Just sit down.
Cyril Clark was a long-time mayor of Shinkoshi. And then they had this, what they called the North Peel Parliament. And it was a Sunday morning meeting in the Apple House up there in Shinkoshi. And it was,
That's Dick Pallett's place. Dick Pallett's place. Pallet House. Barn.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And but anyway, there was, out to the west of here somewhere, there was a gambling club at that time. And a lot of the fellows was out there once a week for a shot at gambling. And I guess Mr. Clark didn't sign his name very well, and he had a mark he put on his work, on his checks. So he ran out of money at the gambling, went up the counter, and he got some cash, and he gave him a check. And just then the police walked in, the rest of the whole bunch of them put them in the coop overnight, in jail and court in the morning. And the lawyer came to Cyril with a check, and he says, Mr. Clark, that's your check? Clark says, yes, it is. Well, he says, why didn't you sign your name properly? Well, he couldn't sign his name very well, so he said, well, that's my check. Yeah, but the lawyer says, why didn't you sign your name properly? And he was very embarrassed then, but he had a great temper as well. And Cyril just stopped and backed up, and he said, maybe I can't write as well as some of you guys, but I can think a goddamn sight better. Thank you.
I thought because we aren't together that often, and I thought that Alec was really good to come out this morning. We have a little cake that we'd like to present to him to celebrate his 100th birthday in November. And so maybe you could all sing happy birthday to him today and stand up and sing happy birthday to Alex. So if you'd like to do that, please. Who will lead? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Alex. Happy birthday to you. So Alec, if you'd like to cut that and so you can take half of it home and the rest can have their share at lunchtime when they have their share.
Come on, Emily, you get ready to marry. There we go.
Libby, no, you just sit down.
Mayor of voted in the mayor of Caledon, and he phoned me, and he said, Alec, has Caledon got a chain of office? I said, I never saw one. Well, he says, Albion hasn't got one either. How do we go and get one? He said, I'll pick up. And here's yours.
Okay.
And I'll pick up Emil and we'll go down to Ryrie Burke's and we'll buy one. So we
remember that.
we drove down to Ryrie Burke's and we went in. But first, on the way down, we went into the Parliament buildings and we each bought a map of the area from the provincial government. It showed all the area we were, and they rolled it all up and very nice. And we walked into Ryrie Burke's, we each had this roll of paper in our hand, and all the clerks squatted down behind their benches. They thought we were going to hold the place up. But the manager took us up to the mezzanine, and he showed us a half a dozen different chains of office. He put them all out on the table there, and we decided on one. And you see, Ivor came from Albion, and Richard there, he came from Bolton. And I think there was a little bit of agnostic between the two of them for a while. And so we settled on one, so he started to wrap it up, and I said, just a minute, sir. Don't you think we better buy 2 or 3 extra links for that chain? And Ivor said, why? Well, I said, Richard's chest may be just a shade bigger than yours. And Ivor said, no damn way. And I don't think he spoke to me all the way home. Who's going to take the next?
I think we can move out. Okay. Yeah. There. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, I got it.
Not the right crowd, mind you.
Why don't you announce that? Okay, Kent, do you want to,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to update the date on the grand opening. In order to accommodate the attendance of the mayors, if possible, we are going to move the ribbon-cutting opening ceremony to the Thursday evening, the 22nd, if you're able to come, so that that's when the official ribbon cutting and speeches will happen, Thursday evening, 6 o'clock here. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, moving on then to, could I have a receipt of those presentations? Oh, Richard, you wanted to say something first.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I won't be long. Hazel and I and Alec Rayburn were members of the last county council, and then of course Alex and I and Emil and Hazel and others were the first regional council. But I was 26 years old when I was first elected, and we were in the not this room but the front room, and the tables were arranged like this but were farther apart. My lasting memory is shoes, because these table desks, if you like, all had vanity boards on the front of them. And I could see across the way the Mississauga councillors all lined up. And in the summertime, they all wore white shoes. And the people that came down from the north, the farmers, all had blue suits and brown shoes on. And the rest of us wore black shoes. So one of the memories that I have is shoes. Alex mentioned the lunch in the backyard, and Emil did as well. And I remember how our council meeting, actually, the last county council actually functioned, and presumably all the ones before. is we did our general committee meeting in the morning. We retired for lunch in a free bar next door from 12 until 2. And in those days, there were no such things as in camera, but therefore the free bar and the lunch and the euchre game that followed it is where we really discussed what we were going to do. In the afternoon, we used to convene as council and then pass all of the motions that were carefully discussed over lunch and the free bar. When Wilton Downey from Bolton was the warden of Peel, and he was an abstainer, the little lunchroom got raided. And because he was the warden, he was the one that was charged with running a free bar without a license, even though he was an abstainer. And Lou Parsons, on the last day of the county council, had him back, and he was 90 at that time. And more or less as a practical joke, he told that story that I just told you, and then reached under the desk and handed him the bag with the whiskey in it, the Crown Royal, and said, you know, we know that now that you're older, you need this. And figuring that Wilton would not respond. Well, Wilton looked at him right between the eyes, and he said, well, you know, as I get older, my joints do get a little stiff. And he said, this is great. He says, I'll just take a little thimbleful. And that's how Wilton responded to that. Finally, Mr. Chairman, like Alex, when I was elected, and remember I was 26, I was told I was the youngest county councillor in 60 years. But as a practical joke, they put me on the museum board and the Homes for the Aged. And the museum board meeting was held the night of the first council meeting in January, but in the back part of this building. And I had no experience at all in government, at all. So I didn't know what it was all about. Well, the museum board sat there for 2 hours, and they debated whether to rebuild 2 cuckoo clocks. And the conclusion they came to is they would rebuild one and leave the other one to the next year's budget. So the next morning, I phoned the clerk of the county. He said, I heard about last night's meeting. We'll take you off the museum board, but you can't go off the Homes to the Aged. And I said, why is that? He says, well, the contractor at Sheridan Villa has just gone bankrupt, and the architect is in Europe somewhere, and we can't get in touch with him. So you have to remember that the county was very small in those days. It didn't do a lot. So Henry Rutherford and I, the clerk and I, had to mosey down there 2 days a week for about 3 months to get the new contractors and deal with claims and all those sorts of things. It was quite an experience. Our income, our pay at that time as county councillors was $1,500. And a lot of people in Bolton were incensed that we got paid anything at all. They felt we should do it all as a community service. Well, as Emma will tell you, I'm not one to ever give money back, so I got the $1,500. I just want to make those few remarks, Mr. Chairman. Less to do with this room and more to do with the final days of the county appeal. I was the deputy reeve for Bolton. Alex was my mentor as the deputy reeve of Caledon because he was in the previous term. And Hazel will remember that I was in the Anglican Young People's when she was the adult coordinator of that. And if you want to talk about memory, Mr. Chairman, she saw me when I was 12. And when I came on to county council at 26, she went over to me, shook my hand, knew my name, and knew that my connection was with the Anglican Young People's. And that's memory. And so she was my model as a politician, and Alex was my mentor. And so here we are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to delegations, could I ask the delegates to come in, please? They are the Mississauga Parent-Child Resource Center, the Executive Director, Jane Van Berkel, yeah. morning.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to come here today and talk to you about the Peel Ontario Early Years Centres. My name's Jane Van Berkel, and I'm the ED of Child Development Resource Connection Peel. This is Angela, and she's a parent that uses the OEYCs. And this is Lori, and she's the ED of Mississauga Parent Resource Centre. This is Duncan. The Ontario Early Years Centres are celebrating their 10th anniversary in Ontario. And I think in front of you, you have an invitation, the blue invitation. We're celebrating this in two different ways. We have events at each main site of the OEYCs on October 18th, and I know that I think some of you have received invitations directly from the early years programs in your areas. And on the 19th, the invitation in front of you is the Community Partners Celebration, and we think the region is a very big partner with the OEYCs, so we hope that you'll be able to, some of you will be able to attend. Our community partners provide support to the Ontario Early Years in many different ways. Some of them are donations of space where we run programs. An example of that that's a bit different would be Fortino's and Brisdale. Our particular OEYC operates there 2 days a week, all day. So that's one way that we have many partners. We also have a number of consultations, things like the Pep Start clinics, Peel Children's Centre, Infant Child Development Services, and other partners such as Erin Oak that come in and do consultations and sessions for parents. They also co-facilitate different sessions, provide resources to both the families and the staff. So we very much are celebrating our community partners next week. And I'll have Angela come forward.
Just before Angela comes, I just want to introduce her. We're very excited to be here and celebrating 10 years of serving families through our Ontario Early Years Centre. And, you know, Jane and I could never do any justice to the services that we provide. So we brought along one of our clients with her two beautiful children. She has one other child who's in kindergarten right now. And we know that Angela will bring to life what the services are all about in OEYC. So thank you, Angela.
Thank you. So I'm a parent that uses the Early Years Centre. I'm also a special ed teacher, and I actually teach special ed at OISE. Basically, this fall, I've been talking about the history of special ed, and two of my kids have special needs. Aubrey has a genetic syndrome called Prader-Willi syndrome. So you'll see she's very little. She's actually going to be 3 this November, so she's exceptionally tiny for her age. Duncan here actually weighs more than she does. So she's little, she's floppy. If you've seen her sort of going through the halls, she's been bum shuffling around. She can't walk yet. She will eventually. And in Aubrey's situation, the early years centers have been absolutely essential in making her be who she is. So if you've seen her, you'll see her smile, you'll see her work the room. And this is such a different trajectory than we would have had she been born, say, even 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we don't even know if she'd be here. When she was born, she was floppy, didn't feed, she was failure to thrive, she was fed with a nose tube. She was beyond the $1 million baby. We had nurses coming into the house to provide support for her. She was in the hospital for 3 weeks. All kinds of specialists are involved in her care. And what has been exceptional in Aubrey's development is being involved in the programs at the centers. So as soon as we got her to the hospital, she was in an infant massage at the Early Years Center, in Mother Goose programs, and if you see her, she'll hold circle time with her own baby dolls. So she's doing, as a 3-year-old, exactly what she has seen at the centers. So one of the points of the history of people with special needs, because this is an anniversary, we're going to talk about history. One of the points of history is special ed came out from parent groups. Really, parents bought themselves a teacher in the mid-50s in southwestern Ontario, rented out a church basement, and said, this is going to be a school for our kids. And the Early Years Centers evolved from something similar. People got together and said, we need programs for our kids. and it snowballed into the earlier centers. And I just want to leave you with that thought, and that you guys are all a part of the history of special needs and the earlier centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And in case you don't remember, Aubrey did visit here at council about 2 years ago. So she was a little bit smaller then, but she had the same beautiful smile that she has on today. She's quite happy to visit anybody. We'd also just like to let you know we've left for each of you a gift in front of your workbooks there. And they are made by the children of the Ontario Earlier Centres. And we thought we would like to have a little memory of what the children have been doing in the last 10 years. So thank you very much.
Well, let me thank you very much for coming here this morning, and certainly I will cherish this little gift that I got and received from Emily as 3 years old, and I'll make sure that we hang this in our office and demonstrate what children can do today at that age. Again, thank you for being here. It's such an important program, and it's so important for our young children that need this kind of assistance at this age. So thank you again. Could I have a motion to receive the delegation by Starr and Tovey? All those in favor then? Motion's carried. Moving on then with the agenda, we're moving down to reports then. Our first business report today is management, and I'll ask Councillor Whitehead to walk us through that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the management report, we have item MAA, which is the report of the Regional Appeal Accessory Committee. Can I have a motion of receipt of that report by Councillor Foley and a seconder, Councillor Tovey? If there are no speakers, all in favor? It carries. B2, the Peel Art Gallery, Museum and Archives renovations. Presentation on that? Oh, sorry, B1, the supply and installation and support of print and copiers. There is a motion that's attached to that particular report, so I need a motion to adopt the staff recommendation. And that's moved by Councillor Starr and moved by Councillor Sprovieri, seconded by Sprovieri. All those in favor? That carries. B2, the Peel Art Gallery, Museum and Archives, the renovations information. And a presentation by Carla Hale, the director. So we're going to have that presentation now.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, just to introduce Carla. Carla is our Director of Communications and Customer Service, and she and the PAMA group is under that division. With her is Mr. Chuck Scott, who is the chair of the PAMA Advisory Board, and with them is Clara Logheed, who is the manager of PAMA. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to PAMA. We're thrilled to have you here this morning, and we hope that you'll get to have a tour later on and see the art gallery and what's been happening at PAMA. So, welcome. Hopefully you have the presentation in front of you. I don't see it on my screen. Okay, so I hope that I can try and advance, but I won't be able to see what you're seeing. So a little bit about the history of the building. You have it in your report. I draw your attention to MA B2, B3, and B4. The presentation will cover off those reports. The courthouse was built in 1866. Your screen might say 1966. And the first meeting was held in January 1867. The jail was built to the rear of the courthouse, thank you to Chuck, in 1867. The original land registry office was built in 1890 between the courthouse and the jail. And in 1958, the Peel County Office building was completed in the land registry office, and council chambers moved in. The region of Peel was created as a successor of the county of Peel, and was given stewardship for these historic buildings. Major changes happened in 1986 and 97 to the buildings and to the advisory committee that supported the programming for these facilities. The former Peel County Jail and Land Registry Office transformed into the Peel Heritage Complex. The courthouse was refurbished in the early 1990s and was linked to the Peel County office buildings. And the former three committees, each one for the art gallery, the museum, and the archives, consolidated into the Peel Heritage Complex Advisory Board. And there's going to be a little bit more about that later, which Chuck will walk us through. In 2000, the highest and best use assessment report presented 3 options for the use of these historical buildings. And further to this, in 2009, Goldsmith, Borgel and Company Limited architects completed the design for the future renovations. Infrastructure stimulus funding was granted in 2010, and the renovations proceeded based on the best use for the space. Substantial renovations are now completed with adapted reuse of the buildings for heritage, arts, and culture. New millwork was matching to the historical tone of the buildings was incorporated. There was a creation of 2 atrium spaces, public and group entrances between the museum and the archives, public entrance to the art gallery, creation of lounge and service kitchen, green roof, and the list goes on. Climate-controlled storage is also added for the protection of our collections. So originally, the courtyard in the tunnel was not included in the concept design for the ISF application. But to connect all 4 buildings, considering the heritage restrictions, no above-ground linkages were feasible. And I believe that Kent talked to you. You have an article in your package about the tunnel construction. So by 1984, Peel was operating the Peel Art Gallery, Museum, and Archives, and there was an active participation and engagement of 3 groups of volunteers, each supporting the 3 functions of art gallery, museum, and archives. In 1986, following the first major renovations of the old jail and the original land registry office, the operation became known as the Peel Heritage Complex. And in 1996, after major construction and planning, the volunteer members of the 3 groups consolidated and became known as the Peel Heritage Complex Advisory Board. To give the board legitimacy within the region of Peel, a report to council was presented recommending the approval of policy G030-01, which was approved by council in January 97. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you Chuck Scott, who is the chair of the past Peel Heritage Complex Advisory Board, and now our PAMA Advisory Board. Chuck has more than 20 years on the board. He's served. We very much appreciate his dedication and commitment to heritage and arts and culture in Peel. He's an independent film producer, a very busy man, and we're thrilled that he's here to speak to us this morning.
Good morning, mayors, councilors, guests. As a member of the board, I guess I should speak to the mic. I won't touch it. I broke the microphone stand on Sunday at the opening, so I'm not going to touch this microphone. I've been on the board of the Art Gallery, then the Combined Board of Peel Heritage Complex, and now the PAMA Board for over 20 years, on and off, not constantly for the 20 years. And in that time, we've seen great changes. This change takes us to the next level. It now gives us space in the art gallery that's climate controlled, that allows us to bring anything into the collection or anything into the building that we want to. In the past, we had problems doing that, and I think that now it allows us to bring a greater scope of education to the region and people who live here. It also allows us to expand to use research facilities for universities and colleges that we couldn't do in the past. The main role of the board is to support the institution. And in the past, we've done fundraising and events. We do a lot of work within the arts and heritage community. So we meet with people who have the potential to provide us with donations, with art dealers, people who have heritage collections. We liaise with them when we, as board members, myself, I get to travel a lot because of my work, so I meet with artists in different countries, I meet with artists in different cities, I have a good connection to the arts community right across Canada, and because of that, we get a lot of donations. So, for example, in the last year, a number of our board members were responsible for over $100,000 of paintings, almost $200,000 of paintings that were donated. We've also brought in heritage items. There's been things donated to the museum because of the liaison work that the board does. So that's one of the key roles. And as we go forward, I think the one role that the board is going to have to really step up their game is to create endowment funds that will provide the funding that can't come from the taxpayers to allow us to buy more heritage materials that come available on the marketplace, particularly some artwork from a number of the artists that came from Peel that we want to get into our collection, but we can't rely on tax dollars to do that. So we need to create endowment funds that will give us ongoing cash flow that will allow us as an institution to enlarge our collection and enlarge maybe some of the shows and educational materials that we do. So I think that part of what we talk about today is maybe the building of a scaffold, because Alex's idea of a mock hanging might be a good idea as a fundraiser. So. Anyway, that's the kind of work that the board is doing, and we've really generated the board with additions of people from Mississauga in our recent election, and we're still looking for a good candidate from Caledon, but we have a great board, and they are really going forward to build our support of the institution. So thank you very much for your support of the renovations.
Thank you, Chuck. And now I'd ask Claire to come and speak to you a little bit more about the programming that goes on here at PAMA.
Thank you very much. The Peel Heritage Complex has had a long-standing history of providing some extraordinary programming, not just at this site, but throughout the entire Peel region. And so the numbers that you've got in front of you are literally numbers from programs while we were closed in the last 2 years. Last year, we had 3,200 school children who participated in our programs. Our Speakers Bureau, which goes all over the region and beyond, dealt out wonderful presentations on a whole range of subjects to over 5,300 people. And the archives had 3,800 plus research requests come in. We've had approximately 200 loan requests come in annually from various collections, and we have also been quietly but steadily earning revenue for an operation that has been close to the public. And as Chuck says, the more contact we have with the community, the more likely it is that people will recognize the scope and quality of what's here, and from their own collections choose to make donations to the facility. But since then, we've gone on to do this huge expansion. We've got significantly more space, and we've had the opportunity to do some extraordinary planning for additional programming, not just for children, but for the larger community and looking beyond these four walls, if you can call them four walls. We are looking to speak to our established audience, not just through exhibitions, but through the programming we develop to support those exhibitions. We are looking for new audiences. We are looking at creating content that is challenging, and we are looking to incorporate more the stories from the corporation of the region of Peel in order to make sure that they get told to a wider audience. The Peel Heritage Complex was able to obtain revenue for educational and social programs from a number of sources. Could you go back, please? And under the circumstances, we are looking at expanding those opportunities. Under the circumstances, earlier this year, we had the opportunity to work through the integrated strategic planning process and take a look at developing a renewed program and business plan that would take advantage of the new opportunities that were presenting themselves with the new facility. This also, of course, includes the ongoing stewardship that we have of this cultural heritage facility. We are doing more work to seek out the voice of the community. We are working extremely hard at developing programs that will draw new audiences and working with social media and the development of interactive items such as our new touch table that will be introduced at the grand opening and the addition of technology in our exhibition spaces. We are looking at collaborations with other regional departments, as I say, to tell their stories, but to also pull conversation from the community to inform how those departments understand this community and set about to serve those needs. We are looking to develop programs with information and knowledge shared by the community in those conversations here at PAMA, and we are looking to see how that can also be used to generate revenue, to determine what sources of revenue are available to us, and how we can support ensuring that those dollars flow to this operation. We're also strengthening partnerships throughout the region, and we have set up the Heritage Working Group, which convened in early 2012 with representatives from all 3 area municipalities, which I will get to shortly. But first, let's talk about money. There are, as a result of the expansion, new revenue opportunities that have come in as a result of the fact that we have more space than we've ever had and can use it in new and entrepreneurial ways. In the past, we've had donations, memberships, program registrations, sponsorships, offered support to the tourism initiatives of the region, but we've also added now a gift shop, which is quite fabulous, and our space rentals in this space in particular is now fundamentally better supported than it's ever been in the past. We are looking to expand on what the Peel Heritage Complex offered, and we are looking to add significantly to the percentage of revenue that comes in through these various streams. As you are well aware, tourism is significant, and cultural tourism in particular is one of the most robust forms of income for any region. We are looking to support the economic health of many businesses, not just here in Brampton, but through programming initiatives through the other municipalities. And we are looking to become a tourist destination for those traveling to and staying within the Western GTA. At the moment, we are working with HACE, the Heritage Arts, Culture and Entertainment Group, as a part of economic development here with Brampton, as well as the GTA's Tourism Partnership and also our own Heritage Working Group. This group, as I said, was convened earlier this year. It has representatives from both government and volunteer organizations coming from Brampton, Caledon, and Mississauga. It was really put together at the behest of this council to find out where there were gaps or potentially overlaps in services. And what it's going to do is provide us with some extraordinary opportunities for collaboration and partnerships. But it's also allowed us already to start recognizing there are some fundamental differences between local heritage assets and their programs and what PAMA is setting out to do. Generally speaking, area municipalities have got a very specific focus on their local geography, local stories, and are very building specific. We, on the other hand, are looking at heritage regionally. We are looking at the larger stories and trying to find ways to tell those stories and pull in those stories to ensure that they get gathered too. Mississauga, for example, has got 11 heritage buildings, including 3 museums, and I'd just like to go through some of the highlights of what they've been up to in the last year. The launching of their Cultural Access Pass with the Institute of Canadian Citizenship took place on September 30th. They've also been adding curriculum-based education programs based on their historic homes and growing this program with the support of Friends of the Museum and a renewable grant from Suncor. One of the things that I should point out is that the Heritage Working Group is also looking to make sure that when it comes to sponsorship, we're not treading on one another's toes. They've also opened the Leslie Log House, which is Mississauga's 3rd museum, which opened this past May. Here in Brampton, and I would like to welcome Stav Kasiris, who's here from the Heritage Group at the City of Brampton, who's here to support us. There was the Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Award for Community Leadership that came in this past year. And this was in partnership with the Ontario Heritage Trust. And they've launched the Community Leadership Program to recognize communities for exemplary leadership in built culture and natural heritage conservation and promotion. The Board of Directors of the Ontario Heritage Trust selected the City of Brampton to receive the Lieutenant Governor's Ontario Heritage Award for Community Leadership for population over 125,000 for 2011. The majority of the work that supported this application comes from designation and maintaining the city's cultural heritage, and these are at the heart of Brampton's heritage program. There is also, as I can attest because I live across the street, the Alder Lee restoration that's been going on. This is located in downtown Brampton, and it overlooks the historic Gage Park, so literally just the other side of the street. Alderley is one of the most prominent and exciting restoration and adaptive reuse projects in the city. Following the removal of all known heritage features, the work began on restoring important heritage attributes and retrofitting the building. Once fully restored, which will be next fall, this magnificent house will once again awe its visitors. And then there's the CPR station, which has been actually a remarkably good resource for us, also understanding how we are to take care of this heritage asset. But the CPR, after a 40-year journey, including the threat of demolition, mothballing, relocation, and dismantling, was reconstructed in 2011. The station stands gloriously as a landmark at Mount Pleasant Village that connects the old, the new, and sets the theme of the square and the entire neighborhood. Working in partnership with Mattamy Homes, the Peel District School Board, and the Brampton Public Library, the city has reconstructed the CPR station and adapted it to function as a cultural amenity space that is an integral part of the joint library, community center, and school. Moving on to Caledon, which also has a very strong heritage designation focus, is the Sneath Road Steel Truss Bridge Rehabilitation. Built in 1910, the bridge is a designated heritage structure, one of two remnant steel truss single-lane bridges found on public right-of-ways in Caledon. The bridge, which crosses the Humber River on the outskirts of Bolton, was recently refurbished and converted to pedestrian use. There's also the Melville White Church, which is an example of designated heritage, the Heritage Property Grant Program. In 2006, Caledon established its designated Heritage Property Grant Program, which provides annual matching grants in support of the maintenance and restoration of designated heritage properties. In 2011, the grant program supported the repainting of the circa 1837 Melville White Church in preparation for its 175th anniversary celebrations this year. And then there's the former St. Albans Anglican Church. It should be noted that Caledon has over 100 designated heritage properties, and this is the most recent designation as of June of this year. The 1882 former St. Albans Anglican Church is a landmark building in the village of Palgrave. The heritage designation was a requirement of the building's adaptive reuse as a restaurant. So you can see the work they're doing is significant, important, valued, but also fundamentally different from what we are setting about to do here at PAMA. So, since 2010, that transformation has been taking place. We were fortunate to have over 1,000 people from the community come and join us as we celebrated the opening of the gallery on September 30th. And we will be welcoming the public to the new museum facility on November 24th and 25th. We did find that with our opening on the 30th that we had visitors from across the GTA and throughout the Golden Horseshoe. The sales in the store in 2.5 hours were over $1,100, which was very cheering. And we've also had in the past week return visitors start to come in to come and see the space. And today we are looking to welcome our second school group who are here on tour and to do an art activity down in what was the second council chamber. Thank you for coming to join us at PAMA this morning. I'll look forward in taking those of you who would like a tour later on this morning to show you this extraordinary facility.
Councillor Mullen? Oh, thank you. Yes, in my area, we have the museums, which is the Benares and the Anchorage and Bradley House. And of course, we're challenged right now with storage facilities for our archives. So I guess I'm wondering what kind of discussions have taken place. We're looking at certainly hoping in the future to have something that we're going to be able to store what we're being given and what's out there in a safe way, in a controlled environment. But that's down the road. And so I'm just wondering what discussions you've had with the city of Mississauga with regards to that. We're looking at certainly some temporary, and I didn't know what space you had available.
Well, we've expanded the space in the archives, and certainly there is a significant proportion of the archives that represents Mississauga collections. we have had a very long-standing collegial and effective professional working relationship with both the archives and the museum staffs in Mississauga. And certainly one of the things that we're looking at is where there are shared interests around the use of software, also around storage and the sharing of artifacts and documents. That conversation has gone on for years. I don't see that changing. And certainly the use of resources in the most cost-effective way possible is at the heart of those conversations. So at this stage in the game, the archives piece is going to come back online for our operation as of Family Day next year, and I would anticipate through the business planning process and what's in our objectives for year one of the full-blown operation, that that conversation will be revived and taken to the next level in terms of how do we work together. And that's not just in terms of storage or documents, but also around programming as well.
Well, I'm not looking for conversation. I guess I'm looking for some kind of remedy in the short term to deal with the challenge that we have right now. So I guess I would like it at some point. I know that the mayor is trying to set up something with regards to the Britannia site, again, long term. But in the meantime, we need something. Otherwise, we're going to be losing what we have and turning away what could be a possibility. So I would like to know if there is that possibility of using some of the storage you have, and if those discussions can become a reality more quickly so that we don't lose what we have.
I think we need to get the archive restarted to understand precisely what we're in a position to share, and then, as I say, start those conversations
Thank
again.
you.
Councillor Sanderson?
And thank you very much for the presentation. Not that I haven't heard it before. As you can see, I'm on the committee, and when I first got onto council, this is one of the first committees that I joined. And I have to tell you, I'm not an arts person, but I am culture and heritage. I believe in all those things. But Chuck and his committee are certainly changing me from that and getting me switched over to a bit of the arts. I had no idea that it had to be how important the storage was, how you stored this material. And we got millions of dollars. And can we say how much we got? How much we got in storage?
The values are not necessarily all current, but we understand that the museum collection sits in the vicinity of $4 million, and the art gallery collection, we suspect, fully evaluated to contemporary standards, would be somewhere in the vicinity of $40 million.
So we have a lot of stuff sitting in storage. So when we first started talking about this renovation of this particular building, and I know years back it was even talked about coming down, and I know that Chair Kolb had a lot to do with saving the complex over there, starting with the jail, and it's just amazing that we're able to do what we're doing on this piece of property right in downtown Brampton, or you might want to say in the center of the region of Peel, is exactly where it is. So I just can't say how much I've really enjoyed being on the committee and also seeing the transformation of what's come out of this particular piece of property here. And under the leadership of our chair and obviously our manager, Claire, it just blows me away every time I come in here or go to a meeting, and the amount of people I've talked to since the grand opening, and just the wow factor. They just can't believe what's happened here. And when the idea came forward about the link or the tunnel, whatever you want to call it there, that was just a great move that we were able to do, to join all the buildings. You come to the building, you come to the complex now, you register, you take your coat off, you leave it there. You don't have to worry about picking it up again until you're all done, because you're all inside. You don't have to worry about going from building to building to building. So, hats off, and I just encourage everybody to take a look around to see what we have here. It's just a great investment. Thank you.
Councillor Miles?
Thank you. This morning seems to be a morning for stories, so I thought I would share my story with all of the members of council, because my roots of community service actually started in this building. And it was I think it was exactly 1980 in Brampton, there was a number of acts of vandalism that were occurring around public facilities, and council got together and they formed a task force to take a look at vandalism and come up with some recommendations. And after a year of a study, this community group came back to council and said, one of the recommendations that we have is that you form an ongoing vandalism prevention committee and you hire an executive director to implement the recommendations, the 12 recommendations that we've made. So at that time, I was a young mom. I had 2 children. I was ready to come back into the workforce, and I saw the job in the paper, and I decided that I would apply. And fortunately for me, because it really did begin my career in community service, but also on council, was I applied and got the job. So they didn't know where to put me, and at that point in time, this was the building, it was in the early 80s, there wasn't very much happening. So they gave me the 2 beautiful offices that are down on the north end of this building, and I remember going in, there was no beginning. I walked in, I had an empty space. I bought a pen and paper and a binder and started from there. And I used to ramble around this building. The only other person was Mr. Barber, who was the curator at the time, and occasionally we would bump into each other. But it was a beautiful place to start. And so this is where the now Brampton Safe City Association actually began. We started the first Neighborhood Watch program out of this building, and over the years, the Vandalism Prevention Committee became the Brampton Safe City Association, and we now have a 31-year history in the city with over 100 programs. And as most of you know, we were redesignated just this year as an international safe community. But all of that began really in this building downstairs. So that's a story that you can add to the archives, because I don't think it's something that anybody remembers. Maybe Councillor Palesha, you were elected to council in 84?
Yeah.
But I don't believe there was any of the original members of council still on our council at that time, so that's my story.
There you go.
And actually in 1988, when I ran for council, it was because I was frustrated with the council of the day that they didn't really see the merit in community-based crime prevention. So,
Guess I wasn't doing a good job.
but we used to come up, people at that time were like, safety, crime prevention was the police's responsibility, and there was no place for the community. So all of that has changed today.
Good.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Could I have a motion to receive the delegation, please? Moved by Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All those in favor? That carries. The next item, B3, there is a motion. This item has to deal with the board composition, roles, and responsibilities of the advisory board. So can I have a motion to adopt the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Haynes, seconded by Councillor Crosby. All in favor? Carries. Crombie. The next item is item B4, which is the Peel Art Gallery Museum and Archives Business Plan. And this requires a motion of receipt. It's moved by Mayor Fennell, seconded by Councillor Foley. All those in favor? That carries. There's one item of communication from Fred Bureau, the Peel Regional Police. I have a mover. Who was that? Okay. And a seconder over on this side? Thanks, Frank Dale. All those in favor? There's a speaker.
As you know, we did not tender the original WOCOM, right? Which I regret we didn't, but that's fine. Are we tendering now all the parts and that has to be purchased? Are we tendering what equipment has to go with the main?
You're talking about the communications here from the Police Service Board on VCOM?
We are. We're tendering the equipment, like we have the central VOCOM system, but then there's equipment to check into it.
Mayor McCann, could I get back to you on that answer because
Could
I'm
you? Yeah, because.
not 100% sure
Yeah,
unless our
I think,
purchasing people
I was-
can answer
I was
that?
concerned that we didn't tender the original. We got a police services board convinced council not to go with tendering. But I understand at the time we were assured that the rest of the equipment that's required would be tendered.
Could I ask if somebody knows, Dan, would you know from, I know we're, I'll get back to you, Mayor
Okay,
McCallion, on that.
thank you.
It's carried. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moving on then to Health. Councillor Moore, would you like to walk through that?
Members of Council, the first item on the agenda is the Resident Assessment and Funding Tool for Long-Term Care. It's an information report. Mayor Morrison?
Yes, when you get to HEA 1-4, and I don't know where the commissioner is. When you look at the second paragraph, the transition to the new funding CMI will result in a decrease of dollars for 2012 and 2013. I would like to know how are we going to make up for this reduction? Because I would imagine we have a certain service level that we like to provide in our homes, and having a reduction of that amount of money in these 2 years, I assume it's the 2000, my second question, the 213,000 in 2012, is the 260,000 on top of that, or is that, does the 213 go up to 260? And how are we going to make up for it? I don't remember reading how in
Yeah.
here.
Through you, Madam Chair. It's not a cumulative, so it's not the 400, whatever.
Okay.
It's the 2 each year. And what we do is, as we do our overall budgeting, we look at what we can accommodate within our existing base, but I think it's fair to say it does put pressure on, and that'll drive some of our increases in the 2013 budget. We minimize it as much as possible, but we're optimistic. Some other organizations have had this tool in place longer than us, and it takes a bit of time to get used to how to properly use the tool and how to properly document the residents' needs, that as we get better at using the tool, we'll see the revenue climb up to what we're used to in the past, which will take the pressure off future budgets.
Okay. And my second question is, can they turn the air conditioning down and the heat up? We're freezing to death in here. Thank you.
Mayor McCallion?
On the paramedic?
No.
No. I have a question on the,
Well, the paramedic reports are the next two. Are there any more questions on the Resident Assessment and Funding Tool? Seeing none. Mayor Morrison, would you like to move the report?
I'll move it.
Seconded by Councillor Mullen. And I'd just like to say that they were just trying to make us feel at home with the cold air here, Mayor Morrison, because we're always get the cold air in the council chambers at 10 Peel as well. All those in favor of the report, that's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is HEB 1. It's the report on the Emergency and Protective Services Committee. Mayor McCallion, is this the report that you had the question on, or was it the Fire and Paramedic Services?
saw it in the minutes. This is a question to the chairman. I believe the chairman of all the regions met in regard to paramedic services. Is that right?
Well, we did, yes, and we reported back on that the minister actually said that she felt that it was time that we put a new set of eyes on the issue about the communication and the dispatch system, and she released the Niagara study then from that meeting also. But I think, I don't know if you want to talk to that study of Niagara Falls. I believe that our feeling from our staff was there was really not much in it that was of any help to us, of the Niagara Falls study that the province held for so long.
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, just to add to that. So this council, and as well as the other GTA councils and the warden of Simcoe, have been advocating to get improvements to the ambulance dispatch system. And so there was a meeting with the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, and she did agree it's time for her staff to take a second look at it. The Niagara study, we are analyzing what the province released. Niagara has also put out communications that they're not in full agreement with what the province has released. So we're just trying to get all the information together before we can make an assessment, because certainly the staff there have told us that they feel that dispatch works a lot better, and that wasn't totally reflected in the evaluation the province released. And so we're trying to gather all the information before we can really even have an informed opinion on what the study said.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I have concern of is we took over ambulance service, and we got really clobbered with costs. And I hope that the regions are not pushing to take over the communication system and we get hit with the costs, because that's exactly what happened. It was 35% picked up by the province. They promised to go to 50%, the Conservative government, and they never did. The Liberal government, I think, has it up to what, 45 now? So be careful what you ask for, because you have to pick up the tab for it. If there's something wrong with the communication service or that the province operates, fix it. And don't have us fix it, which we did with ambulance service. Took it over from the private sector, and it's now costing, it's going to be a major item in the regional budget, because paramedics are unionized, and they're really, in my opinion, demanding exactly what the fire department is demanding, and that's coming. So I have to tell you, be careful what you ask for, as long as you're prepared to pick up the tab for it.
Madam Mayor, we didn't ask to take, which is very important, we did not ask to take over the service. What we did is offer that we would be prepared to work together, both from all four regions, but we did not ask to take the service over. The problem with the service today is that the equipment is getting old, and it doesn't have the capacity to do the things so that they can improve the calls and those kind of things. That's what the whole meeting was all about. It wasn't about us taking it over. It was about trying to get the province to look at the bigger picture and tell them that they needed to put some new equipment in there. But we did not ask to take this thing over.
Good. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, because there has been a move to take it over. There's no question
Well,
about
there's
it.
certainly, we are aware, there certainly have been municipalities go to see them that have offered to combine it with there, but that was not part of our proposal. Our proposal was that they should build a new one to serve the outside of Toronto, and that maybe what they could do is if one system was down, then the other system could take over, and so there would be duplication. It wouldn't be without any system at all. So that's what the proposal was that we presented. And because they wouldn't release the Niagara report, that's why we had that meeting with her.
Well, there's a problem. Services, they're refusing to work overtime, and they want to hire a lot of people. I tell you, it's going to become another, just added to the emergency services of police and fire, that will bankrupt the municipalities eventually, and paramedic is just going to push it over the brink.
Callion. I know staff will stay on top of that and make sure we're informed. Mayor Fennell?
Madam Chair, just recently had the occasion to utilize the Peel Paramedic Service for a family member, and it's extraordinary, the service level, the capacity of the people, the care, and the equipment. And what was, I mean, beyond that, people don't realize that this is a property tax-supported service, that when you call or arrange ambulance or paramedic or transfer services, that's part of the property tax line of services. So yes, we were downloaded this service, and I remember the province was going to pay half of what they considered an adequate service, which I believe was over a 20-minute response time, and we said in the region of Peel unacceptable, and now our response times and the caliber capacity of our staff and paramedics is first class, and I just wanted to say quite publicly, having experienced that just in the last, well, a couple of days ago and last week, what extraordinary service, people, dedication, and equipment that I was introduced to that I didn't even realize we had some of this equipment. And yes, I'm sure it's very expensive and it's a large concern, and it's part of the ongoing communication of what is currently on the property tax bill, both lower tier and upper tier municipalities, as the upper tier governments continue to transfer services. You know, people say, why can't you keep your tax bill? You're growing. So, well, if we were in the same business we were in when the Region of Peel was formed, we would be just fine. But every couple of years, the province downloads or the federal government offloads a service. But this is one service, although we've taken it over. Still believe it was the right decision, although a challenge financially, and wanted to very publicly commend Peel Paramedic Services. I was just beyond impressed. Thank you.
And seconded by Councillor Sato. Are there any other speakers, Madam Clerk? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is HEB 2, the Fire and Paramedic Services Related Steering Committee. I've had two people signal to me to speak, so I don't know if I've got Councillor Paderak and Councillor Sato.
Microphone to come on. Yes, first is a question of clarification. If these minutes are approved, this effectively will put council on record as being in favor of the study, which we'll send out to the municipalities, and the study is valued at a minimum of $250,000. Is that correct, by approving these, that we will be moving forward?
Yes, everybody, City Clerk or the...
So I would move a motion of deferral so that we can have more information before us and we can have a full debate. I think a lot of times these minutes aren't something that when we're reading our agendas that we're putting all of our attention in, and the minutes are quite brief, and this is a major item which I believe requires more attention from this council.
Thank you. You're deferring it to a particular date or a particular...
Would defer to when staff thinks that's appropriate, whether it's the next meeting or in 1 month.
And just refer it.
Okay. Are there any other... Oh, Councillor Sato, sorry.
Thank you. Well, I will support the deferral if members of council need more information. I thought the report that came to council previously, which directed us to proceed with the study, contained all of the information, and we were just trying to flesh out the terms of reference for the committee and for the review. But I would ask that it come back as quickly as possible, as we started this process some time ago, and the committee does not meet that often. And if we're going to proceed, which I hope we are, as council previously agreed, and the municipalities agreed, then I would like us to move forward and expedite this. You know, it's one of those things that the longer we put it off, the less progress we're going to make. What I would like to ask, there's an amendment I'd like to make in the minutes. Under members present, I am not shown as being present, but I was at the meeting.
and I'm actually quoted as making comments within it.
Magical.
Yeah. One other thing I would like to ask, if I could, when we're dealing with this, and I wonder if staff could bring us up to date on this when we're dealing with budget and we're dealing with the with paramedic budget. Some time ago, we had a report, and I can't recall when or the specifics of the report. It might even have been a budget last year, but it talked about the fact that the hospitals charge, I believe it's about a $45, $50 charge, $45 charge for an ambulance bringing someone in. I guess this was granted by the province, and the hospitals collect this money. Basically, my understanding from the report is that it was an ambulance fee, and at that time I raised the question as to why we were not, as a region, considering Mayor McCallion's comments today as well, that our costs are going up for ambulance service, and it doesn't seem to make sense that the hospitals would collect a fee for an ambulance service when we're the ones providing the service. And my understanding, I guess, Jeanette, I think you explained this was a historical fee that the province had allowed the hospitals to collect. And while I know the hospitals need the revenue, so do we. And for another agency to collect a fee for a service we are providing just doesn't make any sense at all when we're trying to offset the cost of the services. So I would like to ask staff that be flagged again this year when we're dealing with budget, and perhaps some comments as to if and how we would be able to do something about that.
Amo should look at it too. Amo should look at it.
Okay. Are there any other speakers?
There are no other speakers.
Madam Clerk? Okay. Then first we will, I think that the amendment in terms of Councillor Sato's attendance is just a correction to the minutes, and that will be done. There is a motion of deferral
To
of that
committee or to
item.
council, ma'am? To committee or to council? The deferral?
To committee,
To council?
Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay. A deferral to council? All those in favor of the deferral of that one item on the agenda, all those in favor, that's carried, thank you. Now if someone, that's, who moved that? Councillor Paderak and Councillor Paleshi? Now on the minutes themselves, I need a mover, Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Anika. All those as amended by Councillor Sato with the action item of deferral. As amended, thank you. All those in favor? Carried, thank you. We now have a brief presentation or a demonstration on the health status data website. Good luck to the staff who have to navigate through to get to the... It is a brief demonstration that we'll see.
So,
Thank you.
Madam Chair, councillors, we're required by Ontario Public Health Standards to obtain health status data and make that available to staff, and that's good public health practice. We use these data in planning our programs and in informing our recommendations to you, among other things. We have now been able to make these data available generally. We believe they will be of interest elsewhere in the healthcare system, to a variety of community groups, and to yourselves. And I have with me today Julie Stratton, who's the manager of our epidemiology team, and she will touch upon just a very small portion of our very large health status data system here. Julie.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to demonstrate this website. We've put a lot of work into it and identified a lot of needs for our public health staff. I'd like to just show you quickly how you can access the site. If you're on the internet, the Region Appeal website, you can access it through Regional Government and Statistics Publications. And you'll see we have a link here to health status data. So the purpose of this website is really to provide access to primarily our staff, but also to external users and stakeholders. We have a plethora of data that you will see, and historically the data access has been quite poor. So this is an opportunity to provide access. You can see along the left-hand side here, these are the topics that we have, the main topic headings. If you hover over top of a main topic heading, you'll be provided with additional detail of what's contained within. The range of the data on this site is wide. We have information about live births, stillbirths, general health status, chronic diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, information about air quality, health behaviors such as tobacco and alcohol use, and more. I'm going to be, I just want to highlight for you two pieces on the left-hand side here that will help you navigate and understand using the site. We have a definitions tab here, which will provide you with information, further information for being able to interpret the data. So we have terms such as crude rate in the site. If you want to find out more about what that means, you can link to a PDF document that will provide you with the definition, give you an example. Sorry, it's hard to navigate this. We'll provide you with an example and how you can interpret the information. So it's to try to help the user be able to use what we've got on the site. We also have, to help you interpret the information, data sources and methods. And you can see here, we have a lot of different data sources contained within this site. If you are using information about live births, for example, and you'd like to learn more about that live birth data set, it'll link you to who collects the information, how the information is collected, how do we analyze it, and what are some of the limitations of the data. So that's to help the user, again, with interpretation. I'm going to just briefly give you a demonstration of how the data are displayed on the site. I'd like to take you to the maternal and child health page and have a look at the crude birth rate. So the data are provided to you in two different formats, a PDF format and a data table and graph format. This is an example of our PDF format. You can print this out for further use, save it to your computer if you want to. What this shows is the crude birth rate over time for Peel and Ontario. So what you can see here is that while our crude birth rate has gone down, you can actually see that the number of live births has gone up, so more service needs over time. We also, whenever possible, are providing maps. We'll just show you a quick demonstration of this. So this map shows crude birth rates by data zone, and data zones are, we have 15 data zones. These are geographic areas that Peel Health is able to use to display our health data. We can't go much smaller or else we would not be able to release it. You can see that the areas within Brampton are spots where the crude birth rate is significantly higher than the Peel average. So it gives you a sense of where births are occurring within Peel. The last piece I'd like to show you, I'm going to show you how other data are presented as well, and I'm going to have a look at cardiovascular diseases. I'd also like to quickly show you a PDF here as well. Using this particular data source whenever we can, we like to display the data for you in a variety of different ways. So this is the prevalence of heart disease over time for Peel. We also have it for Ontario so that you can compare. We provide you with the percent of the population who are reporting that they have this, and we present it by sex, age group, income level, education, immigrant status, and ethnicity whenever we can. So we are trying to provide as much detail as possible in here. The last piece I'd like to share with you, we also have data, the number of people that go to emergency room are hospitalized or die from certain conditions. And I'd like to demonstrate for you the display using mortality as an example of ischemic heart disease. So what we provide are trends by year, trends by sex, and by age group. Sometimes we can also do age group and sex. So I'm just going to show you trends by year. In this format, the data are displayed in two ways. One is a graph format, which compares Peel and Ontario over time. You can see that the mortality from ischemic heart disease is declining. You're able to print this graph, if you like, or you can export this graph to be used in reports or presentations. It comes with the titles, and it comes with all the source information at the bottom when you do the export. Also attached to that is a data table. So this provides you with data for Peel, Ontario, and by municipality. It gives you it for each year, the number of deaths, the population, and crude and standardized rates. You can manipulate this particular table if you like, using the hide columns. You can remove certain columns if you don't need them. And you can also filter if you only want to download data for a certain area. The download button here will allow you to export that into an Excel file format, which then you can use in presentations or in reports. That's the end of my demonstration. That's just a small sample of what we have on the site, and I thank you for your time today.
Councillor Paleshi?
Thank you. The data that you're showing goes from 86 to 2007, so how often are you able to update the data? I mean, that data right now you're looking at is 5 years old.
Depending on where we get the data from, really drives the year. Any of the vital statistics data we have, live birth, stillbirth, or mortality, is typically at least 4 years old. So we have just received the 2008 update, and we'll be uploading that shortly, but that's really as current as that is. For some of the other survey data from Canadian Community Health Survey, we do get that much more frequently, and we are beginning to upload 2009-10 as we speak.
Thank you.
Is that disclaimer prominently announced when people go to the report? Because I think Councillor Paleshi had the question, it's a good one. They may think that we are not keeping it, so I think, the message about where we get the data and the years that we're able to report needs to be clearly available for those who are using it.
Yes, that's a great comment. It should be within the data sources, methods, and limitations page. I will check that when I get back and make sure that that's in there.
Okay.
Councillor Starr? Councillor Starr is the last one.
Okay. Where is most of this information generated from? Where do you get it? I mean, is it something that you have to, I guess, constantly work on, or is it available elsewhere?
Yes, it's a secondary data source, which means somebody else collects it, and then as a health unit, we are given access to it. So the original sources of the data would be Statistics Canada, would be the primary one, and Vital Statistics through Statistics Canada, Canadian Canadian Institute for Health Information provide us with the emergency room and hospital data. So it's not information that we have to collect, but we are lucky recipients of the data.
And how big would your department be? I mean, how many people do you have working on this on say, a year-round basis?
For maintenance on the site, we've set up, we have about 3 people.
How many?
To maintain the site, we have 3 people that will help maintain it, but it's not their primary, it's not what they do every single day. So I'm not sure if I've got your question.
No, I'm looking for how many staff people you have. 3.
Okay, I have a staff of 10.
Yeah, collecting all this data and putting it together.
Not collecting, but just doing the analysis.
Inputting more or less.
No, we receive a data file, and then we would run an analysis on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Starr,
the receipt of the presentation? Sure. And Councillor Sanderson, you'd like to second that? All those in favor of receipt and the report, thank you. The next is, again, a brief presentation by Dr. Mowat and Kathy Granger on the Peel Student Health Survey.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have with me now Sheila Dada, who is one of our epidemiologists who had responsibility of a lot of the Student Health Survey, which also involved staff from our Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention Division. This was a survey we undertook last year. It was done with excellent cooperation from both the public and separate school boards, and we collected data on youth in the school system, grades 7 to 12, and our final number of respondents was approximately 8,500 students, involving 37 elementary schools and 23 secondary schools. And we did have the assistance of Statistics Canada in setting up our precise method of doing that sampling. So the standards which governed the way we undertook this survey ensured there was the very highest quality. We had a number of components. A questionnaire which was completed by the students with parental consent, measured height and weight, an assessment by our professional staff of oral health for grades 10 and 12, and uniquely an assessment of physical fitness for grade 9 students. And this was done using the exact methodology which Statistics Canada uses for its Canada Health Measures survey, and administered with the help of some kinesiology students. Covered a variety of topics, everything from eating habits, physical activity, right through to substance use, mental health, injuries, sun safety, sexual health, and today we're just going to present a very small portion of those results to you. Let's start with nutrition. We found that male students rated their eating habits more favorably than females, but when you actually looked at what they reported eating, they actually had not as good dietary habits as females. We found that as students transition to secondary school into the older grades, their dietary quality declines. For example, consumption of French fries, deep fried foods, soft drinks, etc., increases, and the consumption of breakfast decreases, and about 20% of grade 12 students skip breakfast. About 20% report drinking one or more soft drinks each day, and another 27% report drinking things like sports drinks, fruit drinks, vitamin water. Body mass index. This, you may recall, is a calculation we do from height and weight. Measuring this is quite important. Very often we use people's self-reported height and weight, and we know there is a difference. We know, for example, that males overestimate their height and females underestimate their weight. So what we find what we have found is that our results, as you can see there, are very comparable to the Canadian results. Then both of these are for measured BMI. About 2/3 of children of youth in the healthy weight category, and you can see the 19% overweight and 13% obese. This is in this age group, and this is a dramatic increase over recent years in the proportions in these groups. Another thing that's of related interest that we've put in that is a subject of interest now in public health is the amount of time youth spend in front of screens of various kinds. And you can see that we've got television, video games. The active video games, that's that Wii system, and you can see that really hasn't caught on. And then we have the computer and cell phone. You can see the increased usage on the weekend. This we've compared with the guidelines that come out from people like the Canadian Pediatric Society and Health Canada, and they say no more than 2 hours a day. So you can see the proportion that exceed that. For example, computer and cell phone in females, 65% exceed the recommended time using screens on the weekend. You can't add these up because we found that very often children are using 2 screens at a time. Right, so they may be using a computer and on their cell phone at the same time. So if you add this lot together, the message is that there's a huge problem with the amount of sedentary time. And we now know that being sedentary in front of a screen is not only time that you're not physically active, but there's mounting evidence that the sheer act of sitting down for a long time is an independent risk factor, which we all, adults and youth, need to take note of. Okay. Active transportation. By active transportation, we mean under your own power. For example, walking and biking. The 6-hour thing you see there, that's the recommendation for physical activity from a variety of authorities. You can see that not that many students walk or bike, or they may have other forms of physical activity. School transportation is a really important component, getting to and from school. We have evidence we've looked at ourselves that shows that with the way children's lives are these days, that in fact very little time for them to fit physical activity into their day as a separate entity, and therefore a physically active way of getting to and from school is extremely important. We have a mass of information on this. This is just a few items. You can see a lot of children get driven to school, or they take the school bus. One of the reasons is that a lot of youth do live a long way from the schools in our environment, so it's very hard for them. Now, I have about 3 graphs here I want to show you, starting with a bit of a preamble. These are the national results, and I want to show you, if you look at those bars, the dark bar is 1981, and the lighter bar 25 years later. And these are measures of physical fitness. You have flexibility, muscular strength. Then waist circumference is, we know that that's at a given body mass index, a higher waist circumference increases risk. So these are the national figures over time showing that physical fitness has significantly deteriorated at the national level. And you can also see that waist circumference has tripled over that period of time, and more, and you can see that a more than doubling of the percent who are overweight and obese over time. And now look at Peel, and here we are on the left. This is cardiorespiratory fitness, okay, your heart and your lungs. And on the right, musculoskeletal fitness. And we've used these, the indices and the calculations that StatsCan uses. The bottom line here is that more than a third of males and nearly half of females fail to meet the current standards of acceptable cardiorespiratory fitness, and 3/4 of all grade 9 students, their musculoskeletal fitness scores fall within a range that's associated with either some or considerable risk to their health. And finally, just a direct comparison of Peel, which is the gray, and the national data, which is the yellow. And remember, the longer the bar, the more adverse the results, showing that in particular in Peel region for boys, we have a quite significant deficit in musculoskeletal fitness and muscular strength compared to the national results. So moving on to other topics, here we have substance use, including tobacco. The message here is somewhat different. And in fact, all of these results are significantly better than the national results. Notwithstanding that, they show behaviors which are not good in themselves. One that's very disturbing is that of the smokers, half of them, they report that they can buy their cigarettes directly from a retailer. Given that, of course, it's illegal, and given that there's provincial legislation which we enforce partly, then we need to take a very serious look about how effective the prohibition of sales to minors actually is, and we'll certainly undertake that. So about 41% of these students have consumed alcohol more than once, and 1/4 of them report binge drinking. That's 5 or more drinks at a sitting. But as I say, those figures, bad as they are actually better than the provincial figures. Driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and you can see the percent who have driven themselves, or a much larger number who have been a passenger with someone who's been drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana. And again, those are actually better than the provincial figures. Social and emotional well-being, self-reported. We see that females more likely than males to report feeling emotionally distressed, losing sleep because of worry, or always feeling unhappy and depressed. Two interpretations that either that's a real state of affairs or that they're more likely to report it, or both. Moving on to dental matters, or oral health as we call it here, we can see that this is not particularly good. We looked at decayed, missing, or filled teeth, which represents both treated and untreated caries, and prevalence of, well, basically half of the children have that. We found 1 in 8 had actually untreated dental caries or rotten teeth, and an equal number had some urgent conditions such as pain, infection, bleeding, or so on, and a very high prevalence of gingivitis. So that's just a quick run through some highlights of what we've found. The full report is much more detailed than that. It's this big, and of course, if you wish to see that, that's available to you, and I believe we have a one-page summary which is in your materials. So we'll be using this to support our planning and sharing that with you, how we're using this over the coming years. And of course, we'll be sharing this with the variety of meetings at the school boards, things like Peel Children and Youth Initiative, sharing with them. And we'll be thinking about ways we can communicate this with the parents, teachers, and students. For future years, a lot of other health units have been working with CAMH to piggyback on a survey they do every 2 years, and that is probably how we will be undertaking at least the questionnaire component of this in the future, and we have no definite plans to repeat the direct measurement, although that could also happen in the future. So this was a significant undertaking for us. In particular, the measurement of physical fitness has not been done anywhere else in Canada at the health unit level, and I think it's showing some striking findings. And some researchers at the school board have mentioned they'd like to work further with us on digging deeper on some of these particular findings. That's the presentation, and I'll gladly answer questions. Thank you.
You were hoping for better results, more favorable results than what we got. I can only imagine there's a good number of speakers on this. I'll let the regional clerk, if you don't mind, since you have the list, if you could run through it for me.
Thank you. Chair Kolb?
Dr. Mowat, maybe you got to explain how our staff use this information on their day-to-day work and the value that it is to them.
Well, I can partially explain that. For example, we have a number of nurses on our school health team who undertake a program called Comprehensive School Health, in which they work with, I think it's about a total of 102 of our schools at the moment, in cooperation with school board personnel and principals and teachers, to address some of the issues in those schools with respect to all of these health issues we have here, with a particular emphasis, of course, on those that are term of council priorities around overweight and obesity, nutrition, and physical activity. So they will use these data to inform that kind of programming. We also have been working with the school boards around the school food and beverage policy, and having a better handle on some of the actual nutrition practices of the children will help us both with the school food and beverage policy itself and with our strategy around that healthy eating and physical activity priority, and I believe it will be on the 25th, which is the next meeting, that we'll be presenting that report to you at Council, and that's an example of how these data are used.
Okay.
Commissioner?
Yeah, just to further add to Dr. Mowat, to Chair Cole's question, the last two presentations, you can see the wealth of data that we use. Public health has a very large mandate. There's a list of about this long of things we should be delivering, and there is only so many staff to do it. So a big part of how we use this data is to really prioritize our resources and what the staff are working on. And we use some of this data to shift resources. So we'll stop doing some things and shift to other things, because that's the priority versus coming back and asking for more resources. So just broader than just the schoolhouse survey, which is a critical piece because we do a lot of work with youth. Just in general terms, that's how we use this data on a day-to-day basis, is to get the best use of the resources we have.
And I can just add, really, the way we work, the community is our patient, if you like. And just as a healthcare provider needs to diagnose a patient, in the same way, we need to diagnose our community. And this is a particular subset, youth, but we need to know what is going on.
Councillor Foley?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mowat, for your presentation. I read the report, I read the one-page summary, I went online and I read part of the technical report. To me, it paints a pretty dismal picture. I thought some of the stats were alarming, particularly those around oral health, the 52% with decayed or missing teeth, 63% with gingivitis, and as we know, oral health leads to other health issues. It was really alarming to see that 22% of female students spend in excess of 7 hours a day on cell phones and computers. To me, there is so much here, it's almost like, where do you start? So I guess my question to you is, what is the single greatest thing that you see we could take as a first step to start moving this in the right direction?
Very good. Well, as I've already mentioned to Chair Kolb, we will be coming back at the next meeting with our strategy. And I know that we've invited all councillors to a meeting we have with some people from New York City on the 19th. And both of these are addressing the issue of the connected issues of overweight and obesity, poor eating habits, lack of physical activity, and those health consequences, which include, among others, cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Depends on your perspective, of course. I like to take a whole lifetime perspective, because although these issues we've reported here impact youth now, it's also an indicator, I believe, of their health as adults and as older adults. And it's some indication of the pathology that we will see decades from now and its impact on our healthcare system and on our society. It's taking that perspective, I do believe that those issues I've just mentioned are extremely important. But as you say, there are a number of issues here. And we will be coming to you over time, letting you know what we will be doing about a number of these.
Thank you very much. Mayor Morrison?
Thank you. Excuse me. I find this fairly alarming, considering the percentages. Can I ask you, with regards to the screen time, does that include school time as well as private time, or is that just private time?
It doesn't include time spent in school on computers. On computers.
Okay.
But it would include, right, the time they would spend doing their homework on a computer
okay.
at home.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. A lot of what I was going to ask has already been stated, but I'm just going to make one comment. Watching the news last night, the 11 o'clock news, there was a school that was protesting the teachers not doing, the bill and all this stuff. And I was watching it, and I said to my husband, they're all fat, like they were all marching down the street. And I'm not kidding you, I would say at least 60% of those children were what I call chubby or obese. And like, it was shocking. I would think when you're that age, you're into all kinds of stuff, you're lean and thin, and so I told him that we were dealing with a report today at Regional Council that really reinforced exactly what we just saw on the television screen. So what a shame. Thank you.
Councillor Spovieri?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions, if I may, Dr. Mowat. First, on the dental situation, I'm really surprised to see this big number. I thought that fluoride was doing the trick, but it looks like it's not. With this kind of, no, just in particular, do we know whether these children that were that are mentioned here were born Canadian born, or where they were offshore born? Would we have that information?
We have collected the information. So we did collect self-reported ethnicity and immigrant status on each of our respondents. We have not yet analyzed those data, but certainly we can take your interest and make sure that we do that and share that with you. We do know, however, anecdotally from our dental staff, that the dental health is one of the conditions where recent immigrants to our area are at a disadvantage, and that their overall dental health status, we know from our routine work in the schools, is significantly worse than that of the children who are born here. So that should be taken into account in interpreting these data with respect to fluoride. Also, we have other conditions here which are unrelated to fluoride, such as gingivitis and other conditions.
Well, that certainly would be good to see that information, because whether it's children that were born outside the country where perhaps they didn't have the certain treatments or care, or whether they're locally born Canadian kids that are having this problem. I think that would really be beneficial to know. The other issue on the obesity, just want to share just a little incident that I experienced last week. One of my grandchildren was sleeping over for the weekend, and I think it was Saturday night, and my granddaughter, she's 7, she said, oh, before going to bed, oh, I feel hungry. So she goes into the cupboard and gets the chocolate chip cookies and has 4 or 5 of them on the table with dunking them in the milk. And her name is Ariana. I said, Ariana, I said, what are you doing? He said, well, no, he says, I'm hungry, so I need to eat something. This is what Nona gave me. Well, fortunately, my grandchildren, all 3 are in gymnastics. They go three days a week, 3 hours a day. So they're really, really fit because of that. But as we know, a lot of children don't participate in sports. A lot of them are just sitting around the house playing with their little gadgets that most kids have today. So I think that this is a real, and I also want to share that last week I was watching on Discovery, there's a program called How Do They Make It? And they showed how they're producing cookies, and the amount of sugar and butter, and the amount of production that they produce, and the amount that people buy. And so obviously there's a big problem on how to change people's behavior. And I don't know whether you're going to come back to us with a strategy and how, some programs perhaps, on how to start to educate people on the proper way of raising their children and so on. Because, even though people have a free will and they can do what they want, but at the end of the day, it's all the public that's paying for the medical bill at the end of the day. When these people eventually start having serious problems, medical problems, health problems. So I think that government really, since government has to foot the bill, we do have a big role in trying to turn this around, because the way it's going, doesn't look good at all. It's looking pretty pathetic, so I think we really have to give this some serious effort. Thank you.
Councillor Miles?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, well, I think you've got our attention. Certainly, as I listened to the presentation, the one thing that jumped out at me was there was so much that we could be doing to change this trend. And one of the facts that I think we all found startling over the years is the increase in the amount of children living in poverty. So as we see, the amount of children living in poverty on the rise, is it any wonder then that we start seeing some of the net results of that are really starting to manifest themselves today? And I know we continue to believe that the province of Ontario feels that we are wealthy here in the region of Peel, and that we don't need additional funding to address some of these issues. But the results of, I think, probably the last 20 years where we have been underfunded in most of our human service areas are really starting to manifest themselves in the results that we're seeing here today. You stated yourself about our new Canadians. Traditionally, even if they did understand about the need for proper dental hygiene and care, they may not be able to afford those kinds of those kinds of programs. And then we also have the other side of the coin, where we have many new Canadians living in poverty with children that don't speak English, so they don't know and they're not aware of the programs that are available to them. So really is a vicious cycle. But when you think about it, it's not just those living in poverty, because when you're looking at the stats of the kids that are on computers and their own cell phones, that's not our children living in poverty. That is the medium to high income families. And so it's what I'm going to say is our kids and our grandkids that are constantly on some kind of a communications system. And so as a result, they're not getting out of the house and walking. But then on the other hand, planning. I mean, we're the ones that plan our communities at the local level. And even though we don't believe the province gives us enough money, we're still responsible for making sure that there's schools available in the neighborhoods. Well, I know my two kids were bused to school their whole entire school year. So it's not just health, it's our lifestyle, it's our planning issues, it's education, it's communication, it's awareness. So these things aren't rocket science, and they are within the, in a lot of cases, they all fall in some way under our responsibilities, both at the local level and at the regional level. And we can make changes, but we need a plan. And I think what this does is it should certainly help with our advocacy levels at the provincial level, because these stats are startling. If we don't change these stats, Mayor McCallion, you're right, we will die under the burden within our healthcare system if we do not change these stats. Because when you look at the stats and the impact that it has on our youth, we will never be able to provide the support for this. So I do think that we need to sit down and take a look at the issue and start coming up with some strategies and recommendations that we can implement, not only here at the region of Peel, but in our area municipalities, that's going to change this trend, because this is scary, but we can also start at home. We can start with our own grandkids, and we need to get the message out to parents, like, I mean, it's one thing, I know my nephew comes over, and he's 6 years old, and if I can't do something on my computer, he shows me how. Like, they know the games, can I use your iPad? And the games, and I don't even understand the language that he's speaking when he's talking about what he's doing in these games. So but this, I think this is our lesson, and we're going to have to make some of those changes. And it's not just looking at it from a health perspective; it's everything. So I thank you for doing the work and for the enlightenment, but I hope collectively that we take the steps that we need to change this. Thank you.
Mayor McCallion?
A very, very interesting study, I can assure you, and a little scary, quite honestly. I noticed, I was going to ask the question, but John really asked it. You mentioned fluoride in the water. What would be the situation if fluoride wasn't in the water? And when you analyze the immigrants versus people born here, just make sure that you distinguish what country they come from, because in a lot of countries, dental care was never heard of. So therefore, they never had any dental care from birth until they hit Canada. We know that very well. In regard to exercise, I'm going to, I hope the press in here, because they'll say I'm recommending banning something. Are you even thinking of banning cell phones under the age of 10? Because we seem to be on the kick of banning things. You mentioned the physical. You haven't mentioned really the health effect of cell phones. And I don't mean by them sitting down and not being active, but the impact that a cell phone and a computer has on their health. That's even of concern. This all came out when we dealt with telecommunication towers, that telecommunication towers are not a health issue at all. But the cell phones that everybody uses is a health issue. So if you have kids starting, and I think Gail Miles mentioned, some kids at 6 and 7 know more about the operation of a cell phone and a computer than certainly adults do. So they're starting to use all this equipment at an extremely young age. Think about what will happen when they get to be 40 or 50. And they've been using a cell phone all their life. And in fact, that also applies to adults. Adults are not as active because of cell phones. They can't leave their cell phone alone. I mean, they gotta have that cell phone. Gotta be with them, which is a perfect example for the young people. To say, well, if my mom and dad can't do without it, I guess I can't do without it. So you really have a challenge to deal with the mechanical equipment or the high-tech equipment we now have with computers, cell phones, etc. As to how we, I guess it's education. I mean, are the parents aware? Are the parents aware of the fact that if a kid is given a cell phone, that it has health effects and has lack of exercise, which your survey proves? 7 hours people spend on it. Think of it. Some adults spend 10 and 12 hours on it. Does it also affect adults as well as children?
Not us, we're perfect. Yeah, that's a big study.
Through you, Madam Chair. Well, we have this information because we were able to collect it. We don't have the equivalent type of information on screen time for adults, but we have plenty of information about the trends in body mass index and in physical activity for adults. And not surprisingly, over time, we've seen the same kinds of challenges to adult health. And of course, this generation of children are going to age and be the adults of tomorrow, and the prospect is one that we can't take lightly and need to address.
Well, a neighbor of mine said that her daughter goes to school and is friends with a neighbor's children just around the corner on Drury Road. They never walk back and forth. They use their cell phone. They never visit one another. Don't
They'll be
have
in
to.
the same room.
So they don't have to walk back and forth. They just sit with their cell phone. And it's all acceptable.
That's the parents, though.
Councillor Mullen?
Yes, thank you. Well, I don't want to recommend receipt. I simply believe that we should be recommending that when the report comes back with the strategies, that they're strategies that are actually doable. You talk about a mandate. Yes, there is a mandate, but you know what? We don't have the resources to deal with this. This is huge. And it seems to me that, as some of my colleagues have said, the impact on the future health of people, residents, is massive. It's huge. I watched the documentation, and there are a lot of documentations, by the way, on all of this, all of these issues, how scary it is, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and it doesn't seem to be making an impact. But there was a documentation that I saw recently that talked about all kinds of things you can do for your health, and it came down to one thing, which was the most important thing, and that was exercise. That was the most important thing that you can do as an adult, as a child, on all aspects of your health, whether it's diabetes or heart or whatever. Interesting, so simplistic. So I don't believe we have the resources to throw at this. Somebody had made a comment about what about parents? There is a responsibility at some point in time for parents to step up to the plate. There is a responsibility for parents to become informed. And so what do you do with a document like this? This took a tremendous amount of effort and time, and it's a tremendous amount of information. In my view, the Ministry of Health of the province should be completely in tune with this document. It's been a lot of study, a lot of effort. And then the question is, what do you do with it, and where does it go from here? So I'll be very interested in the strategy, but I don't think you can put a ton of resources on this. There has to be a collaborative effort, whether it's a mandated curriculum in the schools to start with, to start educating parents. There's got to be something that is doable, not just a bunch of recommendations and a strategy. This is serious. This has long-term ramifications from our health system. This is something that has built up over the years through all the gadgets that we have. You're right, Mayor McKay, very few kids walk to school. We all know that because we deal with it in traffic safety in terms of the number of parents who drive their kids. There are so many simple, doable things, and that's what I'd like to see when this is brought forward. So I'm not receiving this. I'm asking that the recommendation come forward with some strategies that don't have 12, 14, 15 strategies, but that are strategies that are doable, that are action-orientated now. And I'd like to know where the Ministry of Health in the province of Ontario is on a report such as this in terms of how they can assist us in getting the message out. We have a mandate to do a lot of things under Peel Health. And we're stretching ourselves more and more and more, and we're getting into things, in my view, that are beyond our ability to deal with. And so we've got to simplify, and we've got to make them doable, and we've got to have partnerships. And the schools and the parents, it's got to start there, in my view.
Just a couple of comments on that through you, Madam Chair. Concerning the Ministry of Health, you may recall that the current minister has an action plan for the healthcare system, and one of the priorities is to address the area of childhood obesity. And she has a target of reducing childhood obesity by 20% in the next 5 years, which I frankly don't think is achievable. But we have, and there is a committee or a task force of experts advising her on that. We have, in fact, already shared some of our data through ministry staff with that task force. We will also be sharing both the full survey with the Ministry Public Health Division And the report you will be getting next meeting has already been discussed with staff at the Ministry of Health and will be provided to them. So that's what we've currently done on that. Concerning the resource issue, I'm going to show you we are not coming at the next meeting seeking additional resources. You have already said that this is a term of council priority. We're providing you, as you say, with some practical actions that we are recommending that we undertake to advance this issue. But it is vitally important that we understand that an issue of this magnitude will not be solved by Peel Public Health, and with respect, not be solved by the Council of the Region of Peel. This does not come about largely because people are ignorant of what to do. It comes about because the way we have constructed our way of life, our built environment, and our social environment makes it extremely difficult for people to do what they already know to be healthy. And our actions, right, must be as a whole society. And the role of public health is to provide advice. But we cannot do this on our own. And I think the history of all the achievements of public health have shown that only when everybody becomes galvanized into action and cooperates in changing the way we live can we effect these kinds of outcomes.
Councillor Fonseca?
I think I'm going to stand up to speak, seeing
Hooray.
as we...
We'll explain that to you next meeting, why it's doing that.
Thank you. Basically, just about everything that I wanted to ask has been spoken to, but I will just say thank you very much for bringing the report forward and for doing all of the work on bringing the analysis together. I think it is a bold move, and it shows leadership in Peel that we are, and I'm looking forward to the report on the 25th, that we're trying to address this. There's a lot of statistics out there, but we are trying to address this in a way, from what I've read in the report and seen so far and also spoken to you about, in a way that we can address it at our level in terms of a region of Peel Council, and also that we're recognizing, as Councillor Mullen has already said, that this is not something that one council or one region can take on itself, but what we're doing is speaking out and speaking up and saying it's important that we are acting now, not just looking at the data and collecting it all together. The statistics are definitely shouting out to us that we need to be working together on this, not only in the short term, but in the long term. And I did have a question for you. I personally believe, and Councillor Mullen has already pointed this out, is that we were built and born to move. We weren't built to be sedentary. So in the report on the 25th, and we already as a region have in place a number of strategies around active transportation are at a municipal level. We have planning, we have implemented in our planning strategies the idea, or not the assumption, but we go back to the stakeholders and ask for their input on what they see in terms of the built form, and that's been a topic of conversation and also part of all of our planning processes at a municipal level. On the 25th, will there be strategies around how we can better move within, like how we can incorporate more movement into our lives? So with our active transportation strategy that's already in place, will there be recommendations that this is working, it's linked to the statistics, we recommend carrying this forward, or no, we don't, or will that be coming forward on the 25th?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is a very, very large topic, as you can understand, and within the constraints of the time available, at council will necessarily be at a somewhat high level. Yeah. But we will indicate to you those areas where we seek your support in working further, and they do include the work we've already started and reported to you on the built environment, where we're working very strongly with the area municipalities already. And it will also highlight what we're recommending about starting to work on transportation to and from school, which is such a vital part of physical activity for children. And we'll also be talking about our workforce here, workplace here at the Region of Peel, setting an example and facilitating, incorporating physical activity into the workday. Those are some examples of what we'll be bringing to you.
Okay. I think that this would be, I mean, for me also play, so movement and play is very important. I think that's a responsibility that has already been brought up for the school boards, and also obviously we all take on that responsibility as parents. But the information that you say in your next steps, the information is going to be shared with other stakeholders. So this information has been shared with the ministry, the data, and the school boards?
We've shared some of it with the Ministry of Health. We didn't want to send them the complete report until it had been released to council.
Or it will
but
be.
we will
I guess
now
I
send
should
them
say
the
it will be
report.
shared.
It will be shared, yes.
Okay, and one other question around the statistics around food. It seems to me that we've gotten completely aware, or young people have gotten completely away from what their definition of food is. If it's in a package, it's considered food. If they can get it really quickly and it's fried, then it's something that they see as nutritious, I guess, or to give them energy throughout the day. We do have nutrition programs in place right now in the schools. Is that correct? On the 25th, will there be recommendations or strategies around how we can address the data that we've seen based on what the students think they are eating and the fact that they think they are eating properly throughout the day? Will that information be brought forward on the 25th?
I'll check and will ensure that that issue is addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Crombie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Mowat, I just wanted to say that I feel really blessed that I have children who balance fitness and nutrition. They come home from school and they're eating barbecued broccoli, or they cut up tomatoes and avocados as a snack. So I'm really blessed, and they're all into fitness. They dance competitively or do competitive rugby and soccer. So I think they've learned through, hopefully, our parenting and through the schools and through their peers. They've struck the right balance. I'm excited about the report you're going to bring forward on the 25th as well, and want to know more about the strategies that you're going to discuss. Want to know if you're going to discuss nutrition in schools and about trans fats and carbonated drinks, if you could speak to that. And also, many people have already made the point about working with the stakeholder groups. In particular, here we are as a regional council, but really the people who will be implementing the recommendations will be the school boards and the parent groups. So that's who we should be working closely with. So how will the survey results be used? Are you planning a public education campaign? Will you be incorporating, working with those stakeholder groups? Maybe I'll just get you to respond to that. I have a couple other questions for you on some of the results, though.
We are actually having a meeting with staff, I think early next week, to look at how precisely we will share with, for example, parent groups.
And how it will be used.
Yes. We've already scheduled meetings with both school boards and Peel Children and Youth Initiative, and now we want to talk about actually reaching parents. So we will move forward on that.
Do you foresee a public education campaign?
We believe these findings are striking, and I also believe from my experience that when people see their own local data, it is much more meaningful to them than something they read about in the Globe and Mail that's about Toronto. There's no question about that. So I believe this has some power, but I also strongly believe that, you know, can be almost nobody in Peel region that is ignorant of the health benefits of physical activity, and go into a magazine store and try and find a single magazine that doesn't have dietary advice in it. I challenge you to do that. So we will be telling you at the next meeting that the value of just providing information, it is a component, but by no means the most important component of moving forward on this. And we've also found, of course, that public information campaigns in a region of 1.3 million people demand a great deal of resources, and
Yes,
it
truly.
may or may not be the
just want-
best return on those resources.
I just wanted to ask a couple of specific questions. I too was very concerned about the rates of oral hygiene and the dental care, but I thought that perhaps the smoking rates had actually gone down. Do you have any historical perspective?
Yes, smoking rates have indeed gone down.
Thankfully.
Throughout Canada and Ontario, and here in the region of Peel. Having said that, our latest information is they seem to have stalled.
Oh.
They've reached a plateau. They are not going down as they have been for several decades. And furthermore, even at our general prevalence of 16, in that area, 16%, it still constitutes one of our most important hazards to health, and still requires vigorous action.
In addition, I just wanted to comment on the screen time. I don't see that as the great evil that other people have alluded to. I think we're in the technological era, and I think it's just it's a fact of day-and-day life for these kids. I mean, they're raised from it right at birth. You know, I don't think I had a personal computer until I was in my 30s, but, you know, my kids are born into it. As soon as their fingers can type, they do. They use it for research, for homework, to communicate, for entertainment. I think it's just a daily part of their lives. You not seeing that with the teenagers?
Well, we'll see. I think opinions vary.
All right. And my final comment would be on the diet and nutrition with respect to the newcomers. Do we see that they do indeed have different diets, and through education we perhaps alter those, and do we see a correlation with diabetes rates and diet?
What we generally know about newcomers is they come in with better than average health habits on the whole, not completely, but on the whole better. And then over the course of, say, 5 to 10 years, their health habits begin to approximate those of
they discover
the
takeout
Canadian-born, and with all of those consequences. Anecdotally, we find that the immigrant youth very quickly adapt to Canadian ways, and there's a shift over from the dietary habits that would prevail in their country of origin. But we will be doing some further analysis of our data here.
And have we done any analysis of the youth diabetes? The diabetes rates?
Youth diabetes rates, what are we doing on that? Without taking up too much of your time, there's a real technical problem in determining prevalence rates of chronic disease. That is to say, how much there is out there, because it's simply not captured. Right. ICES, the Institute for Clinical Evaluative Studies at University of Toronto, has done a fantastic job of putting various databases together and coming up with prevalence rates for diabetes. Unfortunately, the lowest age in their database is 20 years of age. So we have to say that we are unaware of a source of data which would give us the information that you're seeking.
My advice to my kids is always walk, don't drive, and eat as low down the food chain as you can. Fruits and vegetables are the key.
Good advice.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring this discussion, because I suspect when the report comes back at a subsequent meeting, we're going to be going through all of these, the same comments. If there's something additional that the other speakers want to add in terms of providing some direction to Dr. Mowat on what you wish to see in the strategy report coming forward at a subsequent meeting, that's fine. But I think that we've really expressed our shock and alarm to the extent that we can here today. There are more speakers.
There are 3 more speakers.
Okay, can we move quickly through that, and in the interest of being respectful of everyone's time, get to the point of the question and get to the point of the answer? Sorry? Who are the next 3 speakers?
2 of the speakers have spoken before. We have 1 speaker who has not spoken yet.
Okay. With agreement, can we move to the 1 speaker? Just in the interest of time.
Mayor
Who is
Fennell?
that?
Mayor Fennell?
Thank you, and I don't want to repeat all of our sentiments. However, a different perspective I want to ask is we're becoming aware of this problem in North America, as Mayor McCallion said. The cost to really address it will be extraordinary. But somehow, in the last 10 years, we must have rung the right bells, because there are more fitness centers and city facilities sold out. There are more private gyms and memberships than ever before, and there are more nutrition and supplement businesses than ever before. Do we have any idea how many million or billion dollars is currently being spent as people are undertaking on their own to become fit? Because if we ever could coordinate and focus the dollars, we're saying, where are the dollars going to come from? Well, young people are joining gyms and gym memberships. How many people in Peel, for example, are spending $30, $40, $25 a month, signing 3-year memberships with our municipalities? We're built, like, in as much as there's elementary children who are with an obesity problem, there seems to be a large population who are spending their own money accessing fitness. So we must be reaching someone. And I think of a very dynamic lady in our community, Councillor Sanderson, will know her quite well, Miss Wallace, and she runs a wellness center called Champions for Change, and really promotes in the community messaging about being active. And I'm sure there are many other people. So if we could sort of tie that together, because the explosion of money being invested in supplements to be healthy, supplements to build our bodies better, and the amount of dollars being spent on gymnasiums when you could just walk through the park. I think it's all a question of what Councillor Miles said earlier on today. It's a question of safety, perception of safety. There's more at play here. People drive their children to school because they're afraid they might not get there. It's not because the sidewalks aren't plowed in the winter, not because the sidewalks are uneven. They're not uneven. The entire community development needs to look at why are people taking rides when they could be walking. And as Councillor Crombie said, I'm lucky. Both my sons are very active in fitness. They eat like Canada Food Guide. I don't know where that was implemented, not for me, because our generation is the ones that should be at the gym and we're not. But something's working, and we need to identify where it's working and figure out, working, we've been reaching people, they've been reaching people. Because if we could get a handle on the billions of dollars that people are voluntarily sharing to be a part of a gym, that there's a reason people have decided to part with their own hard-earned after-tax money to go work out 5 days a week. And there are lineups. If you go into any of our city facilities, every piece of equipment is full. If you go in hotels, they all have gymnasiums, and they're all being used. It's extraordinary. So something has connected, and we shouldn't not incorporate how did that message get through to those tens of thousands of people, and how do you get that message through to the 8-year-old. And, I mean, I think seniors are well aware of walking and using transit. So it was a new thought of sort of a different, out-of-the-box thinking. There is money, it's being spent on supplements and gym memberships. So people are concerned about staying and being healthy. Thank you.
And I believe David Swark wanted to respond. No, you changed your mind? Wise man. Moved by Councillor Palashi, seconded by Councillor Miles. All those in favor of receipt of the report? That's carried. Thank you.
Local level. Grassroots is where the success will be.
Thank you.
We're all in agreement that we need to put the paddles on and shock the community, all aspects of the community on this. There are 2 items of communication. They are both here for receipt. It's been moved by Mayor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Foley. All those in favor? Seeing no questions, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. It is 12:30, so I think we're going to adjourn for lunch. Just hang on a minute. And also, so we're going to give you an hour. I'm going to say an hour and 5 minutes maybe. So let's be back by 1:30. Lunch is, if you go out this door, to your walk right into the next room, and it's all out in there. Tables are set up there in the lounge. And the tour then is going to be immediately after you've eaten. We have some tour guides. How many?
I'm not sure how many.
Okay. So we have some tour guides. I'd like you to take a tour and then come back for 1:30. Thank you. Our next item is Human Services, and I'd ask Councillor Palashi if you'd like to take us through that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. You have before you Committee HSA1, which we dealt with earlier, but I don't believe the report was moved. So it's been moved by Mayor Fennell and seconded by Councillor Fonseca. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. You have 3 communications items. Does anybody want to speak to any of those? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Miles. All those in favor? That's carried. One was a referral to staff for a report, so I'll move that one separate. Moved by Councillor Paderak and seconded by Councillor Carlson. Looking at him, he's going, Carlson. So all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Pass it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for ratification.
And is Councillor Thompson here? Councillor Starr.
The first item is PWA, the Ministry of Transportation West Corridor Assessment. Any questions, comments? It's for information. Do they need a motion? Don't need a motion, okay.
We need a motion, but there was no speakers.
I'm sorry?
We do need a motion, there was no speakers.
Motion of receipt.
Motion was, that's why I said we need a motion. You
Yes.
said you know.
No speakers? Yes, we need a motion.
Yes, okay. A motion is moved by Councillor Palashi, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? Those opposed, carried. Operations support. The Committee of Revision report. Moved by Councillor Dale, seconded by Councillor Carlson. All in favor? Carried. The Transportation Area, the Arterial Roads Review Committee. Move it. Moved by, I'm sorry, Councillor Sato, seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? The question? Oh, okay.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'd like to see the number of people in Mississauga that operate traffic lights, and the number in Brampton, and the number at the Region of Peel. I'd like to see the total picture of the situation and how, because the whole idea of this is to try to reduce staff and that give Brampton and Mississauga the opportunity to look after their own traffic lights, which I think is very essential at the local level for us to be able to manage it. Because, I think that's good. But I'd like to see the financial, which is coming, the financial deals, and I assume the staffing will be, because the whole idea is to reduce staff, I would hope. Secondly, Caledon will continue to be managed, operated, and maintained by the region. I just say to the mayor of Brampton, why can't Brampton look after the regional lights and eliminate the operation at the region completely? Because that's really when you start saving money and eliminate duplication.
Well, Dan, do you want to answer, or do you want me to answer?
If you want to answer first, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mayor McCallion, we always, Mississauga has looked after the region of Peel lights in Mississauga. Brampton has looked after the lights in Brampton. And all we have done is done the maintenance, been responsible for the maintenance of Caledon's are in the same contract that we have at the region of Peel. And so that has been the way it's been for a long time. I don't know how many years, but that's the way.
Why can't Brampton, and it's up to Brampton whether they want to do it, but as I look at it, with the regional traffic lights in Caledon, why can't Brampton be contracted to look after the ones in Caledon
they do
as
that.
well as Brampton? Because there is some connection between Brampton and Caledon. There's, you know.
My understanding that it's been for that for some time also. I don't know how long, but.
So that means that I'd hope that this arrangement would eliminate any staff at the region looking after the traffic lights, computerized traffic. And that is the objective, in order to eliminate costs. So you're going to still have staff at the region looking after the lights in Caledon.
Dan, do you want to respond to that? Because you've been working on this for quite some time.
Well, I would ask the committee, I'm going to ask the committee if they would look at that.
I think we have already looked at that. I think that work has all been done, Mayor McCallion.
Well, then give me the reasons why it has to be that way. It's not in the report.
Dan, I'm going to refer back to you. Maybe you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the rest of the council, the discussion was actually had with all the city staff from the 4 municipalities, and kind of the concurrence at this point was that the city of Brampton didn't want the liability of managing issues in the town of Caledon, whereas we're already in, most of the signals in Caledon are ours or the province, and we're already delegated that from the province. So if the committee wants to relook at it when we bring back all the, the agreements and the financials at that point, but the report as is basically the feedback and the consensus of the 3 area municipalities as to what they're interested in going through at this point.
Well, I think it should come back with all the financial arrangements and the staffing, because the staffing is the key. You know, how many people are you going to keep at the region to look after some regional traffic lights in Caledon?
Well, Mayor McCallion, my position has always been that, and I think the regional staff are to this position, is that if we were doing the same as what's done in Durham or done in York, where there is one system, and we have said, I believe that we have said, we don't care who operates that system, but all of it should be under one system and operated by a group of people that now operate those lights. And even in Durham and in York, I don't know about in Peel here, but even the 400 series highways lights are operated under one system with the region there and the area municipalities. That's how you really save money if you want to save money and save an operation. So I think the onus is on Brampton and Mississauga, where they're prepared to trust each other's staff to do that kind of a system in the Region of Peel. We have said, we don't care who operates it, we'll pay our share for our lights, and you control the whole thing. Then if there's an accident, at least you can divert traffic, you can divert it if there's congestion, and that's the real system that we should probably have in Peel. So in the long term, I believe that picture is very, very clear, and that's what we should all be working to. And we've already said at the region, we're prepared to work with the two cities to try to get to that goal. And I think from the Caledon staff, they had no problems with that, because we've been looking after the provincial lights, the regional lights in the town. I don't know how many lights you have in the town, but we don't have that many in Caledon. I forget how many there is.
The majority, Mr. Chairman, are ours in
Are ours?
Caledon. There's only about 5 or 6, I believe, and they're growing, but 5 or 6 that are town, and the rest are ours in the provinces along Highway 10
There's only
and
5
Highway
or
9.
6. Why have,
There's 5 or 6 that are the town of Caledon's, at the town of Caledon intersections. All the rest, there's many more than 5 or 6, but all the rest are either provincial or regional intersections where they intersect. So, but that belong to the town itself, 5 or 6 of them.
details to come back.
Okay.
If we're going to go through an exercise, I want to show the savings, where the staff's going to go, because you have a huge staff at the region for it now. And we have one, and Brampton has one. Where are we going to get the savings? Because, and efficiency as well. And the closer the action is to the local level, the better. In other words, that we phone, Brampton has a problem, they phone the Brampton staff.
Okay.
Mississauga has a problem, they phone the Mississauga staff and get action right away.
Okay.
Oh, it's an efficiency as well as cost saving.
Okay.
Councillor Miles?
Thank you. Well, I guess that leaves me a little bit confused, because later on in the minutes, under additional items, it says that Councillor Sato stated that Mississauga Council passed a motion requesting the Region of Peel to consider funding the capital maintenance and operational costs of cycling facilities, sidewalks, street lighting, and other municipal infrastructure on regional roads. The subject was presented to Regional Council, and it was referred back to Public Works. So it's like, on one hand, we want to take it back to the local level, but then on another hand, we're asking for the region to take over maintenance and responsibility. So
Well, I don't know.
is this
That's
two
the
different
ele-
issues?
Council will have to answer that. New to me.
Because to me, it's like you're asking for one thing in one hand and another thing on another hand. So we should probably get some clarification, because it says further that Councillor Patrick advised that at a recent road characterization study workshop, one of the assumptions made was that the entire road allowance would be the responsibility of the Region of Peel, and that some issues would be contracted out to area municipalities. So I don't know why we would splinter street lighting and then send more. So maybe we could get clarification, because it doesn't, to me, that doesn't make sense that we're doing one thing on one hand and another thing on another hand.
This is new sidewalks and all that. That's
So I'll just leave that for,
Councillor Sato?
Thank you. Yes, I can certainly clarify that. It's kind of like apples and oranges. The issue of the traffic signal operation is totally separate from the issue of sidewalks and cycling lanes. The reason why the signal operation makes more sense to remain in Brampton and in Mississauga at this period of time is the stage that both of the municipalities are in with regard to replacing the signal operation system. And you cannot stop that process at the point that it's at today. So at some point in the future, this will be revisited, but at this period of time, given where both municipalities are in the tender process, it makes sense to continue with that status quo. The issue that the mayor raised with regard to the Caledon roads, it was never recommended and has never been discussed at the committee that Brampton operate the Caledon roads. It's certainly some, are the roads, the signals. Our next meeting is in January. We would certainly, as chair of the committee, I would certainly be open to staff bringing forward, if there's a desire by the members from Brampton, to discuss Brampton taking over the operation of the traffic signals in Caledon. It hasn't come up, but you know, that's what this committee is for, is to vet any ideas and suggestions that come forward. The issue with regard to the sidewalks, quite frankly, is one that just makes sense, because when we go in and we widen a regional road, we own the entire road allowance, but we only build the road. Then the municipality has to come along and build the sidewalk and maintain it, and as well as the cycling lanes. And from an operational perspective in the past, because the sidewalks were owned by the municipality, and I'll give you an example, Erin Mills Parkway, our city crews would come along and plow the sidewalk. The regional crew, which was maintaining the road, not the sidewalk, would come along and plow the road and then come back later and push the snow back from the splash pad and cover up the sidewalk that the city crews had just gone out and cleared, because they were two separate divisions, one owned by the city, operated by the city, one owned by the region of Peel. And through discussions with staff, I've met with Dan and Martin on this, Martin Powell, our commissioner, and it seems to make sense that the region might not end up doing the work, might contract it out to the municipality, maintenance on the sidewalk and the pathways, whichever makes sense. But it just makes sense that if the region is building the road, the region should be building the sidewalk and the bike lanes and all of the things that are within the regional road allowance. It just does not make sense that you have two jurisdictions going in, two separate construction, and then two separate maintenance programs afterwards. So that's where we are looking into that, and that will be pursued further. There's been no decision made on that. Staff are going to be pursuing it, and we'll deal with that in the new year.
Councillor Palashi?
Well, yeah, I just want to mention that if that is going to be brought back to the committee, then I certainly would want all the background information. I mean, tell staff now that we certainly need all the background information, what their legal reasons were, what Brampton's concerns were as to taking over the signal operation. I'm sure there is jurisdictional agreements that have to be put in place and that type of thing. So if we are going to discuss it, my only suggestion is start working on bringing that information to the January meeting, then, rather than waiting and then we say, yeah, bring it back in January, and then it's going to be another 2 or 3 months that to take it over. So I think I thought the committee we were looking at all aspects of this, of eliminating duplication of systems and seeing. I mean, there was even the discussion, have all the signalization up to the region and let them handle all the signals too. I mean, that's an option that you got to look at. You got to look at who has the better system to deal with these issues. So hopefully we can tie this up in the very near future. And
That's all the speakers?
I guess for clarification, are we looking, I know that the additional items in the minutes from the meeting show that there is some sort of report coming forward from you, Dan? I mean, is this what's happening? Is this what I'm hearing we need?
There's going to be, if I can through you, Mr. Chairman, a series of reports coming through the committee. The committee's asked us to actually look at a comprehensive work plan of, in effect, the matrix of all the issues, so that they can review them and give some direction on one at a time. Signals was the first one. Things like access and planning issues are up there as well. Sidewalks, the street lighting, they're all on the list. So it's a matter of how quickly we can get to all of them, but there will be reports on an ongoing basis to all the committee meetings. I will talk to the Brampton Commissioner to kind of get his folks aligned, to put their stuff in writing. But I say this, up to this point, it's been with full consensus development with all 4 municipalities. So, and as indicated by Councillor Sato, the initial view of this was really related around the system improvements that both Brampton and Mississauga were doing. So things like safety and stuff like that was not on the table. It was really about the traffic signal systems themselves. So, but again, that's all on our work plan.
Councillor
Okay,
McCall.
just to be, just for clarification then, adoption of the report or receipt of the report, that would be included in the, some of the comments that were made here. I assume that? Okay.
There are 2 more speakers that have added to the list.
Okay.
Mayor McCallion?
Yes. You know, another thing that has caused problems over the years is access to regional roads, control of signs on regional roads. And just remember, at the local level, we have computerized traffic lights on local roads. And we have computerized traffic lights on regional roads. And the two have to work together. So you can't have the municipality looking after their local roads and not be responsible for the regional roads. It makes sense, because they connect. So you have a group up here deciding on the traffic light, the control of the traffic lights in Mississauga. And we have a group that controls the traffic lights on local roads. Doesn't make sense. So I hope the report, and I have every confidence that Councillor Sato has been involved in this all along, that the report will come back with all details. And if we talk about regional, I think she's raised a good question on lighting and sidewalks. I had never thought of that. But one thing we have run into is signs. The region controls the signage in my municipality on regional roads and in Brampton. We should control that. Access should be controlled by the local municipality, because we're the ones that issue the building permits for access and to develop the economy. So there's a lot of issues, and I have confidence the committee will deal with them.
Councillor Palashi?
I just wanted to suggest to the commissioner that he contact our city manager. We do not have a Works and Transportation Commissioner at the present time. We're doing a search for the replacement for Tom, who retired. So I would prefer that you contact Mr. Corbett and then he'll direct who to get the information from. Thank you.
That's all the speakers?
All in favor? Carried. The next item is PWD, Water Hanlon Feeder Main, and is to do with the advisory group, a report suggesting what we talked about, I guess, some months ago. Moved by Councillor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Dale. All in favor? Carried. Now, maybe you'll have to help me on this, because the next one is an in-camera matter. Do we want to bring that forward, or do we want to do the rest of it? Do you want to bring the in-camera item?
It's up to council if they want to move in camera now. It's a related item to the Hanlon.
I think we should
What's the
move
wish?
in.
You want- Okay, we'll do there's only 1 or 2 other items. We'll do those first, and we'll move in the camera at the end. We have PWD2, the professional engineering services for the Hanlon Feeder Main.
That is a related report, so if you wanted to do it at the time of the in-camera,
For the professional engineering?
they're all related.
That's not the in-camera, though.
It's not the in-camera, but the in-camera is related to the Hanlon.
So what are you suggesting?
Of the engineering firm is to do the evaluation,
That's what I
which
thought.
the committee has just been set to do that, so.
Okay, we'll move ahead with that one. PWD2, it's the engineering services. Do I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Sprovieri, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? carried.
Do you want to do the communications too then? No?
Communications. Do you want to move those one at a time, or all of them?
No.
We'll move them all at once. There's 3 or 4, moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Tovey. All in favor? Carried. I guess now that's the end of our business. We can move into, let me just check here. Yes, we can move into in-camera maybe?
There was one additional item in Public Works that I mentioned at the very beginning. It's the letter from the City of Brampton in response to the Transportation Development Strategy, including the revised preliminary route planning study, and receipt is recommended for that. So could I have a...
Moved
Okay.
by Mayor
Fennell?
Fennell, sorry. Seconded by Councillor Beleshi. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, now maybe we can move into camera.
Okay, so maybe we'll just move on with the agenda then, and I'll do the bylaws, the 3 readings of the bylaws that are on the agenda. Are bylaws number 87, 2012, a bylaw to accept and assume the dedication of land to public highway proposed. Would someone like to move and second the bylaws? Patterack and Romby. Are there any questions? If not, all those in favor, carried. Down under other business, we have the resolution from Mayor Morrison in regards to the interest arbitration reform in Ontario. Mayor Morrison, would you like to speak to that?
Just trying to,
It's item 8A.
I'm trying to find it, I can't find it here. I haven't got enough room. Okay. Yes, I mean, we've talked about this at this table, about the arbitration, and AMO has taken it on as something that is extremely important to municipalities, and so I know it's going on our agenda in Caledon for our next council meeting, and I think that it should be done by the Region Appeal too. Would you like to second it? Okay, Mayor McCallion said she would second it. That's right. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So I moved it, Mayor McCallion seconded it?
Okay, is there any questions on that? Then if not, all of those in favor? Opposed, any other? Motion's carried. Moving then on to notice of motion. We have a notice of motion from the town of Caledon requesting that the Region Appeal complete a feasibility study in order to consider implementation of environmental assessment from Airport Road from Mayfield Road to Highway number 9, which consideration of possibly bypassing Caledon East, and this is to be considered at October 25th, 2012 meeting. Someone like to, I don't need to move in a second. Okay. So motion to receive it here today?
Just receive it.
Do I have a motion to receive it today, Thompson and Tovey? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Then I need a motion to move into camera with some of Starr and Fennell. All those in favor to move into camera? Okay, I would have to ask the audience all to delete, shut off the TV.